Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Janet Lorita Tillman. Even the most pious image can conceal a dangerous person. Clever manipulators can deceive entire communities, gather loyal followers, and carry out sinister deeds behind their backs. The population of Vincent, Alabama, USA, is about 2,000 people, and here you can still encounter neighbors who are not afraid to leave their doors open or their keys in their cars. Timothy Dane Tillman worked at the local Renaissance Center and was considered the best preacher in town. Many looked up to him as a mentor and source of support. Nevertheless, the man's story turned out to be full of mysteries. Until 2000, Timothy traveled across the states, preaching the gospel. He managed to embark on an extensive pilgrimage from Florida to Minnesota. People responded positively to his words and felt supported by him. The pastor's wife, Janet Tillman, was a very modest woman and a caring mother who embodied the image of a priest's wife. She was always there, trying to support her husband throughout their marriage, during which they welcomed two daughters, the eldest, Jessica, and the youngest, Fanny, who seemed to withstand any obstacles and problems. The pastor never forgot that the foundation of his work was charitable activity, demonstrating this through actions rather than words. For example, when Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana, he saw an opportunity to support the community that was struggling to recover from the disaster. In September 2005, he proposed a fundraising event called the Hunt for Turkey, which was essentially an outdoor shooting range. The proceeds were meant to help those in need. Everything was organized as best as possible, but on October 22, 2005, after the third shot, one of the rifles jammed. The pastor, along with his wife, was concerned because the situation seemed quite dangerous. One of the church members offered to fix the gun, but Timothy declined, worried about the safety of the many children and strangers present in the church. He decided to put the gun in the trunk of his car, where it remained for 4 days. On October 26, Janet took the faulty weapon, while her husband took 2 other rifles, intending to store them under their bed. Janet went first, with Timothy following her. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the pastor's house. According to Timothy's confession, when he entered the room, the rifle hit the door frame and accidentally discharged. A bullet struck Janet, who was a couple of meters away from him. She was seriously injured and began to bleed in her husband's arms. As help arrived, she repeatedly told him that she loved him and their daughters. When the police and ambulance finally arrived, it was already too late to save Janet. The pastor was overwhelmed with grief, crying almost constantly and covering his face with his hands. The most devastating news for him was that his wife did not survive. At that point, few understood what had happened, and the police were preparing to take Timothy to the station for questioning and to record an official statement. He wandered around the church courtyard, blaming himself for inadvertently killing his beloved wife. Everyone knew him as a good person, incapable of any cruelty, and they wanted to support him, convinced that it had been an accident. When Timothy was at the station, he was able to give a full account of the incident to the police. He described what had happened in detail, explaining about the jammed rifle and that Janet had wanted to protect those present by putting it under their bed. He also mentioned that she had taken the 2 remaining weapons to the room, where one of the rifles accidentally discharged upon hitting the door frame. The police found him to be credible. He seemed like a decent person, a worthy member of society, and a pastor. It was hard to believe he had any malicious intent. Consequently, there was no reason to detain him, and Timothy was allowed to return home to his children. When Janet's sister learned this tragic news, she was shocked and decided to call her brother to share her feelings. The first assumption he voiced was that this was not an accident. They discussed everything and approached the police with their suspicions. After collecting all necessary data, the investigators decided to look into Timothy. To their surprise, it turned out that the church minister held 2 driver's licenses. One was issued in his name, and the other was in the name of Timothy Patrick McNally. Interestingly, the second license was issued just 4 months before the tragedy, raising suspicions and indicating that the pastor had something to hide. He reverted to his official name just a few days prior to the incident. During this time, the victim's family had been discussing secrets that had troubled her in the past, which now began to be confirmed in unexpected ways. From the very beginning, Janet's relatives were convinced that her death was not an accident, and they had good reasons for their suspicions. In fact, Timothy's relationship with Janet's family had always been strained. They considered him a liar and a manipulator, believing that he had deliberately turned Janet against them to the point where their connection was nearly severed. Despite these difficult relations, they felt obliged to say a proper goodbye to Janet and sought justice. Tension arose the moment the relatives of the deceased appeared on the threshold of the house where Janet had died. They didn't even shake hands with Timothy, as everyone thought he was the culprit. Janet noticed that the pastor was avoiding eye contact, and Timothy did not offer any words of greeting or apology but immediately began to express how much he loved Janet, insisted that he would never harm her, as if he were justifying himself. After several days of intermittent communication and observing all the oddities, Janet's relatives were convinced that she was a victim of deliberate murder. They even sent an email to the district attorney asking them to investigate, insisting that this crime was not an accident and believing that Timothy Tillman was the killer. After not receiving the expected response, Janet's sister, Joan, contacted the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. Subsequently, an FBI agent was sent to meet with the sheriff from the city police department. He was shown a recording of the police talking to Timothy. In this video, the agent did not notice anything suspicious. According to him, Timothy was acting scared and very confused, but this fear could have been caused by the death of his wife. Suspicions began to strengthen when the FBI agent learned about 2 driver's licenses belonging to Timothy from before the accident. From that moment, the agent decided to investigate the pastor's past in the hope of confirming or refuting the fears surrounding him. Curiously, the minister of the church had a far from holy past. From the outset, it became evident that he had a weakness for women, resulting in periodic infidelities. He liked to visit strip clubs, which was known to his wife, who initially felt outraged but eventually resigned herself to his behavior, choosing not to divorce for the sake of their children. Timothy married Janet in December 1983, their first daughter was born in 1986, and their second in 1991. The Tillman family lived in Jacksonville, Florida, where Timothy worked as a pastor. It was discovered that in 1986, Timothy was seen leaving a strip club, behavior that parishioners deemed unworthy for a preacher. Following their complaint, he was fired from the church. His sinful lifestyle could not be atoned for by the eloquence he possessed, forcing him to seek new employment. However, he became a pastor again, though not for long, as he was soon caught in an inappropriate relationship with one of the parishioners and was fired again. To avoid traveling around the country in search of a new position, he took a job in a prison. During this period, Timothy liked to call himself a policeman. In reality, he worked as a civilian, sitting at the entrance, registering those coming and going. One day, he encountered a call girl. Later, she claimed that he had abused her near her home. This incident was investigated, and the former pastor was subsequently charged and sentenced to 10 months in prison in Minnesota. The abuse accusation seemed too much even for the all-forgiving Janet. During this time, Janet decided she had had enough. Exhausted by his regular betrayals, she and her children chose to start anew. She contacted her relatives, who helped her relocate to Alabama, where she found a job in the same office as her sister. This reunion allowed her to learn just how sinful Timothy truly was, which ultimately ruined their relationship. Janet began working in the office and contemplated a career, finding it much better than continuing a relationship with a husband unable to control his animalistic urges. For several months, the sisters lived together. Janet even started to recover and forget about her problematic husband. Then, unexpectedly, Timothy called. He stated that he was being released from prison early for good behavior and wanted to surprise his family. He asked for forgiveness and swore he had reformed, constantly insisting that he loved his children and that Janet could not deprive their daughters of their father. Despite her deep disappointment and feelings of betrayal, Janet allowed her husband to return to the family. Close friends warned Janet that this was a bad idea, but she did not heed their cautions and began to distance herself from her family once again. The Tillman family reunited, and in 2000, Timothy vowed to leave his past behind. They began to attend the Assembly of God, where he befriended the pastor and gradually began to speak in the church. Over time, this eloquent speaker opened doors to other religious organizations. Thus, Timothy first appeared at a revival event in Vincent, Alabama, where his wife hoped everything would be different, wanting to avoid another move. In January 2003, when they visited the center, there was no pastor present. It seemed like an incredibly fortunate coincidence. Timothy volunteered to conduct the service and performed so well that they decided to hire him without conducting any additional checks or interviews. He was seen as a very talented and eloquent preacher. Gradually, the unholy father managed to become the senior pastor of the church while concealing his legal issues. He behaved with restraint around women and did not visit questionable establishments. Indeed, before hiring someone for such a position, they meticulously checked for any convictions related to abuse, and his previous dismissals from several churches could have posed a significant problem. Nevertheless, Timothy succeeded in hiding these incidents, typically using standard excuses like losing or forgetting his documents. It was astounding, but it seemed to have worked. A skilled manipulator could have talked excessively. In Timothy's biography, there was still nothing to cling to. Concrete evidence was needed to start building a case for premeditated murder. Eventually, the police became interested in the case and actively got involved in the investigation. Timothy was not informed about all this. He continued to lead an ordinary life, believing that he had fooled everyone once again, while the investigation suspicions grew. Meanwhile, he took advantage of the support of the local community in every possible way. The locals rallied around him and his children. They supported their beloved pastor and even provided him with financial assistance. A few weeks passed. Suddenly, Timothy announced that he needed to leave his daughters with family friends for a while and attend a pastor's conference in Washington state. The event was expected to take a significant amount of time. It seemed strange that a man would decide to undertake such a long trip during this difficult period. The pastor's phone calls needed to be checked. During the trip, one number contacted Timothy more frequently than others. The contact was investigated and turned out to belong to a woman named Molly Bizzari. Considering that the pastor was traveling on a business visit, it seemed odd that he maintained constant communication with a woman, including evening conversations clearly outside of working hours since the death of his wife. It had been several months since he returned from his visit to Washington and attempted to start anew with his children. Unexpectedly, Jessica called her grandmother and reported that she had a fight with her father after discovering suspicious messages on his social media accounts. Judging by these messages, her father seemed to have been involved with Molly during his trip to Washington. The daughter was shocked to learn that he had forgotten her mother so quickly and found a new romantic interest. As a result, rumors began to spread that the pastor had a mistress for a long time, possibly even during his wife's life. In any case, now the pastor could have a motive for committing murder. Perhaps his relationship with this new woman had become serious, and he decided to marry her. Divorce is always long, difficult, and expensive. If he was indeed grieving for his deceased wife, who had died in an accident, he would not have so quickly pursued a new woman. Thus, the first confirmation of suspicions was found. Now it was necessary to determine when his acquaintance with Molly had begun. The police began to examine Timothy's emails and discovered that they had first contacted several years ago. It was an anonymous communication that he could maintain unnoticed. Interestingly, he had been trying to win Molly's favor for a long time. During this period, Janet worked a lot and did not suspect her husband, or perhaps she simply did not want to confront any potential infidelities. Meanwhile, the communication continued, and Timothy became more immersed in their long-distance relationship, clearly wanting to advance it to a new level. Gradually, he learned that Molly's father was a military man. At this point, he decided to create a fake identity and reveal it to his interlocutor. He posed as a naval officer. As it turned out, he even visited a military goods and paraphernalia store where he assembled a Navy lieutenant's uniform to impress his mistress. Now, before the detective stood a man leading a double life, one with a wife he had buried and another with a woman on the side. The investigators were convinced that all of this was more than mere coincidence. The trip to Washington raised many questions. It was apparent that Tim had used a driver's license under a different name, which confused not only his mistress. The preparation seemed too serious. Until now, it was unclear why he would kill his wife if it was possible to simply get a divorce. Soon, the detectives had an answer. Perhaps a divorce could undermine his reputation in his new community, and he feared revealing the darker aspects of his personality. Additionally, it later came to light that he received a payout from Janet's life insurance after her death, which could also have served as an additional motive for murder. The detectives decided to meet and speak with other church employees. In addition, the police informed the public about the man's history of violations, including charges related to abuse. Many were shocked to learn that the pastor was capable of such atrocities and how insidious the liar was. However, there were supporters who viewed the accusations as a conspiracy against the holy man. Damage to the pastor's reputation was done. Detectives sought tension so that the suspect would begin to make rash decisions and mistakes. Many townspeople began to believe that Timothy had deliberately killed Janet. The whole scenario, which was being portrayed as an accident, seemed strange. The decision to take the weapon from the event to his home, specifically to his bedroom, did not seem justified. And now it seemed clear why the armed forces had acted this way. Rumors began to spread. Church members stopped feeling the same reverence after the preacher's speeches as they had before. On the contrary, uncertainty grew, and suspicions about him increased. Timothy stopped being trusted, and some openly expressed dissatisfaction with his behavior. Apparently, the tension led the pastor to turn to the church leadership after some time and express his desire to leave his post for another location. Despite everything, there were supporters within the community who provided him with financial aid and assistance with his move. The pastor claimed that he intended to take his daughters and return to Florida to be closer to his family. For the detectives, this looked like a disaster. The police officers from the armed forces did not yet have the necessary evidence to press charges and arrest the suspect. They were forced to simply watch as Timothy left Alabama. At some point, the detectives began to fear that he would escape justice, but investigators did not abandon the case and continued working to achieve justice for Janet. The situation changed rapidly after Timothy's departure. His sister called the police and reported a curious phone conversation that had taken place just minutes earlier. While she was at work, the phone rang with someone inquiring about Janet, identifying themselves as a representative of a credit institution. They stated that Janet had taken out a large sum of money on January 6, 2006, which was very curious since Janet had already died by that time. It was about $5,000, indicating that Timothy had used his wife's name and reputation to commit financial fraud. There were suspicions he could be involved in more such episodes. However, the most valuable implication was that it provided an opportunity to arrest him for fraud. This, of course, gave detectives a good opportunity to question Timothy about his wife's death. The suspect was not naive, so it was necessary to act carefully. The investigators knew the suspect well. They carefully analyzed his personality and behavioral characteristics. Therefore, they aimed to provoke a loss of self-control, which would allow them to secure a confession at the right moment. Although the chances were slim, this might have been their only chance. The detectives traveled to Florida for what would be one of the most challenging interrogations of their careers. It began as an ordinary conversation, and under pressure from the evidence, Timothy confessed to the fraud. He claimed he had financial difficulties after the death of his wife and the loss of his job, stating that he needed money for his move. Naturally, this was not the only thing the detectives wanted to discuss, so they smoothly changed the topic to the accidental shot that had occurred in his marital bedroom. Unexpectedly, his story began to shift. Initially, Timothy had stated that he accidentally discharged the weapon against the door frame. However, now he claimed that the rifle had slipped from his hands. He then added that he had accidentally tripped over the threshold when entering the room. All these inconsistencies provided the detectives with opportunities to exploit this change in narrative, particularly concerning the switch of the surname from Tillman to McNally shortly before his wife's death. Timothy had an excuse. He claimed that his brother was involved with Janet and that he did not want to be part of the Tillman family. Eventually, he decided it was foolish and changed his surname back. Of course, this strange story was not believed. and the obvious lies only strengthened suspicion against him. However, a confession or some material evidence was necessary. The officers spoke with Molly. She willingly agreed to cooperate with the investigation, stating that the trip to Washington was made for an engagement proposal, supposedly in August 2005, before his wife's death. According to her, Timothy had initially introduced himself as a divorced pastor, and that's how their relationship began. All this time, she believed he was free, but it turned out they were only separated by distance. He had surrounded Molly with lies about his military service, even claiming he was conducting secret missions on behalf of the US government. He then recounted a tragic story about his ex-wife's death, presenting a different version of the accidental shooting. Previously, he had not mentioned anything like that. According to him, Janet had supposedly moved the rifles when the shot accidentally went off. In subsequent letters, Timothy referred to Molly as a kindred spirit and expressed his eagerness for their reunion, stating that she would become a mother figure for his daughters. In support of her words, Molly provided access to the correspondence she had with Timothy. Her entire story was confirmed that the main suspect had become engaged to a woman he had found while his wife was still alive. This only confirmed the suspicions against him. Timothy Tillman was again interrogated and immediately began to lose his composure. He shouted that he had not killed his wife, even though 6 months had passed since her death. But even then, the authorities still did not have enough evidence. The case was just being built, so Timothy was arrested for financial fraud. The man was extradited back to Alabama. Janet's family expected justice, but unexpectedly, Timothy was released from jail. It was too early to panic. This was a deliberate move. Timothy remained under suspicion, and the detectives wanted the killer to believe his story was being accepted. The list of charges against him was limited to forgery of documents, and for the next 5 months, Timothy lived in Florida with his daughters, hoping that all the bad was behind him. Finally, a case against the pastor was built, and they decided to charge him with the murder of Janet. He was arrested without warning. According to detectives, at that moment, his knees almost buckled from surprise. The big problem was the presence of only circumstantial evidence. Therefore, there was a high probability that the criminal would escape punishment altogether. However, the prosecution took this risk and sought a confession, which Timothy refused, opting not to accept a deal with the prosecutor's office. It was also unclear how the shot from the rifle was provoked. The prosecution had only one rule to prove guilt: the constant changes in testimony during interrogations and other lies. On the prosecution's side, there was a witness named Jimmy Abbott, the man who had brought the rifles to the shooting event. He had personally repaired and inspected the weapons before giving them to Timothy, ensuring everything was in good order and unloaded. They had only managed to shoot from one rifle, which jammed. Thus, to conduct an accidental shot with any other weapon, it would have been necessary to deliberately load it. Moreover, the pastor's decision to postpone the event because one gun jammed seemed strange, as it was possible to simply continue shooting with other rifles at the shooting range. Timothy's choice to take the rifles into his bedroom generally baffled everyone. A few days before the tragedy, Timothy wrote a letter to Molly's father, convincing him of his serious intentions. According to Timothy, he would soon solve all his problems, and they would get married. The prosecution believed that under certain circumstances, the defendant would kill again without hesitation. Timothy himself refused to testify in court. Despite using his classic method of presenting himself as a pious man, the jury saw through his lies. For many, his demeanor changed dramatically. The man who had been a spiritual leader for an entire community turned out to be a cold-blooded killer who did not even look at his children as he left the courtroom. Timothy Dane Tillman was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment in October 2009. Following this, there were numerous petitions, and even a retrial took place, but his guilt in the murder was once again confirmed. Timothy was also sentenced to 10 years in prison for forgery of documents and fraud. The killer remains behind bars and will probably never be released.
As the sun set over Veracruz, Sylvia Jasmin got into her red car after enjoying a relaxing pedicure. She had just shared a warm meal with her mom and hoped to be home for dinner. Everything seemed normal. She parked by a quiet bus terminal, unaware that someone was watching her closely. The evening felt familiar calm. Then, suddenly, something happened. Hours later, Sylvia had vanished. Sylvia Jazmín Armendariz Alpuche was born in 1994 in a city in Veracruz, Mexico. She was the only daughter of Jose, an engineer in the oil industry, and Sylvia Alpuche, a dedicated homemaker who focused on raising her daughter. From a young age, Sylvia excelled academically. Thanks to her family's stable financial situation, she was able to attend a good school and fully embrace the opportunity. In addition to her academic success, Sylvia demonstrated exceptional talent in drawing and public speaking, receiving many awards during her school years. After graduating from high school, she studied industrial engineering in Mexico City. She also had a strong interest in languages. Through her determination and hard work, she became certified in both English and French, which provided her with opportunities that many only dream of. As a young adult, Sylvia gained independence and started her professional career at a large state-owned company in the petroleum and natural gas industry. However, her life wasn't solely about work and ambition. She cherished moments with her family, her close friends, and her 3 dogs. Like many young women, she envisioned getting married and starting a family one day. This dream began to take shape when she met a young man named Aldo. Aldo and Sylvia's life together is not well documented. Some sources indicate they met at work, while others believe it was at a gym. Regardless of the circumstances, they began dating. However, their relationship deteriorated quickly as Aldo became possessive and controlling, which conflicted with Sylvia's independent and determined personality. They eventually broke up between May and June of 2019. Sylvia moved on, concentrating on her personal goals and the life she was creating. On August 14, 2019, everything changed. That morning began just like any other day. Sylvia had breakfast with her mother, and later, they enjoyed lunch together, a tradition they both cherished. This would unknowingly be their last meal together. At around 4:30 p.m., Sylvia left home in her red car for a pedicure appointment downtown. Shortly after, she sent her mother a picture of her freshly painted toenails, assuring her she would be back in time for dinner. However, as night fell, Sylvia did not return home. Her mother became increasingly anxious and tried calling her, but there was no answer. She sent messages to find out if Sylvia's plans had changed. The response she received felt off. It lacked the usual warmth and affection that Sylvia always expressed, filling her with a sense of dread. By the early morning hour, her initial unease had escalated into a full-blown panic. She reached out to her family, hoping that someone might have seen or heard from Sylvia, but no one had. In a last attempt to find answers, she contacted Sylvia's friends, including Andrea, her daughter's closest friend. Andrea, who was also 25 and from Veracruz, had an impressive background like Sylvia's. She had excelled academically and earned a degree in petroleum engineering. Andrea specialized in oil well productivity, held multiple certifications, including one in English, and even started her own business in 2018. She was engaged and in the midst of planning her wedding. Despite their hectic schedules, Andrea and Sylvia remained close friends. Their bond started in preschool and grew stronger throughout high school, making them feel like sisters. On August 15th, Andrea told Sylvia's mother that she had talked to Sylvia the day before, but had not been in touch since. Worried, Sylvia's mother asked Andrea to call Aldo, as she had been blocked by him. Andrea reached out, but Aldo said he hadn't spoken to Sylvia in more than a week. His indifferent response did not help alleviate anyone's worries. As the hours went by without any news from Sylvia, her parents' initial concern turned into deep worry. They ultimately decided to report her missing at the local police station. Shortly after filing the report, the police found Sylvia's red car parked near a bus terminal, but there was no sign of her. Time passed slowly until a call from an oil company worker led to a shocking discovery. While clearing an area near the pipelines, workers noticed human remains discarded in a makeshift dump by Cosoleacaque Nueva Tiapa Highway in southern Veracruz. When the police arrived, they found a disturbing scene. The only identifiable remains were 2 lower legs, clearly belonging to a woman. The rest of the body had been severely burned and was unrecognizable. Investigators only had the legs to identify the victim, so they contacted Sylvia's parents. When her mother saw a photograph of the remains, she instantly recognized them as her daughters due to the nail design, which matched a photo Sylvia had sent her just hours before she went missing. However, forensic verification was essential. The remains were sent to the medical examiner, and DNA results a few days later confirmed the heartbreaking truth. The body was that of 25-year-old Sylvia. The forensic analysis revealed a horrific scenario. Sylvia had been shot in the head, but the bullet wound alone was not the cause of death. Experts determined that she had died after being set on fire while still alive, wrapped in flammable plastic bags, which explained why her lower legs had not entirely burned. Armed with this disturbing evidence, investigators began to look into Sylvia's social life. During their discussions with family and friends, one name kept coming up: Aldo Castellan, her ex-boyfriend. Their breakup had been due to his possessiveness and jealousy, raising immediate concerns. When the police attempted to find Aldo, he had disappeared. His family claimed they did not know his whereabouts. This led to increasing suspicion that he had not simply vanished, but had received assistance to escape. Online speculation surged, filled with alleged sightings and rumors about where he might be. Meanwhile, Sylvia's family prepared for her burial, mourning deeply as they laid her to rest at the local cemetery. Her parents, heartbroken, struggled to comprehend how their lively and accomplished daughter had met such a tragic fate. As the investigation into Aldo escalated, authorities learned troubling details about his background. Just before Sylvia's murder, he had taken a 30-day leave from work. He also deleted all his social media accounts and severed connections with his former friends and acquaintances. His history was alarming. During his time as a student, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and frequently exhibited aggressive behavior. He often arrived at school armed and confronted classmates aggressively. Despite numerous concerns voiced by people at his university, he faced no repercussions, reportedly protected by his father, who was also known for his explosive temper. Further investigation showed that Aldo escaped using an ambulance from the state-owned petroleum company where Sylvia worked. He reportedly received help from an uncle in planning his escape. In response to this elusive and potentially dangerous fugitive, the Attorney General's office announced a reward of 400,000 pesos for any information that could lead to his capture. Meanwhile, Sylvia's mother channeled her grief into activism. She organized rallies, distributed flyers featuring Sylvia's photo, and demanded justice. Her efforts joined a growing movement of families in Mexico, determined to ensure their daughters' stories are not forgotten. When the global issue began in early 2020, leading to lockdowns and restrictions, Sylvia's family and supporters quickly adapted. They utilized social media to organize virtual campaigns and protests, determined to keep her case in the public eye. For several months, there was no progress in the investigation. However, on July 14, 2020, nearly a year after Sylvia's death, there was a significant breakthrough. Aldo, now 32, was arrested. Officials attributed his capture to diligent investigative efforts, while media outlets suggested it was a stroke of luck. Police had received an anonymous tip about a man causing a disturbance at a public transport stop. When officers arrived to question him, he brandished a knife but was subdued and identified as the fugitive. Upon confirming his identity, authorities noted that there was an active warrant for his arrest for the femicide of Sylvia. While in hiding, Aldo took many steps to avoid being found. He lived in a well-supplied home that helped him stay hidden for several months. He also changed his appearance a lot by gaining weight and growing his hair long. When he was finally questioned, he claimed not to know Sylvia, but it didn't take long for his lie to fall apart. Aldo was arrested and moved to a social reintegration center, where he was formally charged with Sylvia's murder and with attempting to destroy evidence by burning her remains. Soon after his arrest, his mother shared a letter online declaring her son's innocence. She argued that there was no solid evidence against him and suggested that he was being unfairly targeted simply because he was Sylvia's ex-partner. In her statement, she claimed that Aldo had suffered physical abuse at the hands of the police, who she accused of trying to coerce a confession. She also criticized law enforcement for not exploring other potential leads in the case. While she expressed compassion for Sylvia's family, she pledged to advocate for what she believes to be the truth about her son. Aldo's mother said her son had gone into hiding for nearly a year because their family was receiving death threats. When Aldo was found, it brought relief to Sylvia's family and friends, as many thought the case was close to being resolved and that justice was finally coming. However, just when it seemed closure was within reach, unexpected news changed everything. On December 3, 2020, the police arrested Andrea, Sylvia's lifelong best friend, in connection with the crime. This news shocked Sylvia's family and the community. Andrea was a key advocate for justice, even providing the crucial voice message in which Sylvia identified Aldo as her potential killer. She supported Sylvia's mother during protests, allowed her phone to be analyzed for evidence, and was widely recognized as a vital force in maintaining attention on the case. However, authorities accused her of involvement in the crime, stating they had strong evidence against her. Prosecutors reported that several protected witnesses came forward, with one claiming that Andrea had been secretly involved with Aldo while he was with Sylvia. These allegations caused distress among those who knew both women. Andrea rejected all accusations, insisting that she had been in a serious relationship with another man she intended to marry before her arrest disrupted those plans. She provided a detailed account of her activities on the day Sylvia went missing. She claimed she had visited a spa, forgot her wallet, and called her mother to bring it to her. Her mother confirmed that they returned home together around 8:30 p.m. However, cell tower data contradicted their story. Analysis of the phones belonging to Sylvia, Aldo, and Andrea showed that all three were at the same location around the time the crime likely happened. This discovery led to new protests, this time initiated by Andrea's parents, who argued that their daughter was being wrongly accused for not testifying against Aldo. By early 2021, Aldo and Andrea started sharing their perspectives on the situation through letters and social media posts from their detention centers. In one handwritten note, Andrea expressed her gratitude to those supporting her and her family. She hoped that the prosecution would take a closer look at the evidence and reconsider the possibility of a mistake. Meanwhile, Andrea's parents initiated a social media campaign to share photos, documents, and her side of the story. They also called for the anonymous witnesses who accused her to be revealed, arguing that transparency is crucial for ensuring a fair trial. Despite their efforts, the outcome remained unchanged. In September 2022, after a long and emotionally intense trial, 27-year-old Andrea was found guilty of murdering Sylvia and sentenced to 70 years in prison. The judge referred to the so-called overwhelming evidence, especially the geolocation data from Andrea's phone, which showed she was at the crime scene during the crucial time. For Sylvia's parents, the verdict provided some legal closure, but it did not bring peace. Meanwhile, for Andrea's family, this verdict marked the start of a new struggle, one against a sentence they believe was based on flawed evidence. Andrea's defense attorney criticized both the prosecution and the judge, arguing that the trial was affected by inconsistencies and weak evidence. From the defense's viewpoint, Andrea was condemned not for any proven involvement in the crime, but for her refusal to testify against Aldo. Although she knew about the violent relationship between Sylvia and Aldo, Andrea had never seen the crime occur and lacked concrete proof to blame anyone. Her mother publicly condemned what she called a flawed investigation, highlighting that, even though 4 alleged eyewitnesses came forward a year after the crime, none had actually witnessed the event take place. There was no solid proof of a romantic relationship between Andrea and Aldo, which prosecutors used to suggest they were involved together. The main issue was the cell phone geolocation data. Prosecutors argued that this data placed Andrea at the crime scene and claimed it came from her phone. Meanwhile, the lawyer argued that Andrea was being unfairly blamed, serving as a convenient scapegoat for a public demanding justice. After the investigators struggled to create a solid case against Aldo, they shifted their focus to Andrea, perhaps to avoid confronting their shortcomings. In November 2022, Andrea's legal team filed an appeal with the Superior Court, seeking to have her conviction overturned. They also requested an investigation into possible abuses of power and political interference, highlighting actions by the then governor of Veracruz. Andrea's family was hopeful that the higher court would act fairly and give her a chance to demonstrate her innocence. After nearly 2 years, Andrea achieved a significant breakthrough. She was granted a federal writ of protection, a legal order from the federal courts. The court determined that her trial had serious procedural issues. The federal court has ordered a new trial, which allows previously withheld evidence to be presented. This decision gives Andrea a fresh opportunity to prove her innocence and possibly regain her freedom. The most recent development in Andrea's case took place on April 21, 2025, during an important hearing. Her mother reported that the new defense team introduced verified geolocation data connected to Andrea's actual phone evidence that had inexplicably been left out during her first trial. This data challenges the prosecution's claims and could undermine the basis of the original conviction. However, as of May 2025, Andrea's release had not been officially decided. At the same time, Aldo's legal proceedings were facing significant delays, and official records showed that his trial had not yet started. Despite several requests from his defense team for house arrest, a judge upheld his preventive detention in 2024. By March 2025, Sylvia's mother, along with friends and supporters, organized a protest calling for Aldo to be put on trial. During the protest, she raised concerns about why the accused had not yet faced justice while in custody. The prosecutor's office provided vague explanations, mentioning that procedural delays were due to ongoing legal appeals. Sylvia's case has become emblematic of the fight for justice in a country plagued by gender-based violence, which continues to affect many lives. What originally seemed to be a closed case has now raised serious issues about due process, corruption, and the impact of delayed justice. The ongoing debate questions whether Andrea was truly involved in her friend's murder or if she is an innocent victim caught in a broken legal system. Should Andrea be released? She is innocent or guilty?
Roxanne was born on September 21, 1961, and grew up in a family with 2 sisters and a brother. In 1987, at the age of 26, she married Derek Duran. Before their marriage, Roxanne studied chemistry at university and worked in a pharmaceutical plant, while Derek was employed in the computer industry. Both were ambitious and career-focused, but always made time for each other. Their relationship blossomed as they planned to start a family after achieving their professional goals and purchasing a home. In 1996, at the age of 34, Roxanne and Derek decided to move to the countryside to escape the noise and bustle of city life. They settled in a large house in Wales Creek, just a 30-minute drive from Portland. It was close to their workplace, yet it offered the peaceful rural lifestyle they desired. Additionally, they purchased land on the outskirts of the city, which gave them the privacy and tranquility they were seeking. It was an idyllic setting, perfect for settling down and starting a family. Initially, life in their new home was peaceful and they built close relationships with their neighbors. Their spacious house became home to several cats and dogs, but a sense of emptiness remained. Sadly, they were not successful in having children, despite keeping hope and continuing to plan for a family. At this point, Roxanne decided to restore the farm, with a dream of raising horses, a passion she soon devoted herself to. She invested heavily in the farm, determined to turn it into a profitable family business. Initially, Derek, as the primary breadwinner, was skeptical. He worried about the financial risks and questioned the feasibility of Roxanne's plans. However, she remained undeterred, often explaining how working with animals brought her peace and helped relieve stress. Eventually, they decided to expand their property to accommodate the growing farm. Sadly, Roxanne did not live to see this dream come to fruition. On Sunday, February 4, 1996, around noon, Derek left the house to buy groceries while Roxanne stayed home to rest. About 30 minutes later, neighbors living about a kilometer away noticed thick black smoke rising into the sky. While they couldn't determine the source of the fire, they suspected it was significant and called the fire department immediately. The farm's remote location delayed the fire department's arrival, which took nearly 20 minutes. By the time they reached the scene, the entire house was engulfed in flames. Fire poured from every window and door, and the roof appeared on the verge of collapse. Unable to enter the blazing structure, firefighters focused on containing the flames from the outside. Meanwhile, Derek, returning from the supermarket, spotted the smoke from afar and raced home. When Derek arrived, he saw firefighters struggling to control the fire. Noticing Roxanne's car still in the garage, he informed the fire chief that she was likely inside the house. Tragically, the flames were too intense for anyone to enter. Grief-stricken, Derek was overcome with despair. He screamed, cried, and even attempted to run into the burning building, but firefighters restrained him. Helpless, he fell to his knees and watched in agony as the fire consumed their home. The firefighters took about 3 hours to extinguish the fire. By the time the flames were under control, the house had been completely burned to the ground. In the aftermath, authorities discovered charred human remains in extremely poor condition. The damage to the remains was so severe that determining the victim's gender, let alone identifying them, was impossible. Even forensic experts had difficulty analyzing the bodies because of the severe damage, while supporting documents such as dental records were destroyed in the fire. To identify the victim, investigators opted for a more precise approach. Bone marrow samples were extracted from the remains and compared to DNA samples from Roxanne's parents. This analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Roxanne, Derek's wife. Once her identity was established, the focus shifted to uncovering the cause of the fire and determining the circumstances of her death. The cause of the fire became a puzzling mystery. The house had been completely destroyed, leaving little evidence to explain how such a devastating blaze began. However, the fire brigade suspects that the fire may have been deliberately started by humans, as its intensity indicates signs of human involvement. This raises important questions. How could the fire have spread so fiercely, and was someone behind it? The fire spread quickly, destroying the family's entire farm, making Derek an immediate target of police attention. Authorities were baffled by Roxanne's death in the fire. Why hadn't she escaped and saved herself when the fire started? The flames did not engulf the house instantly but spread gradually, which should have given Roxanne time to take action and flee. Even if she had been asleep, the acrid smell of smoke or the sound of crackling flames would likely have woken her. Moreover, farm animals will also respond, contributing to the alarm. These factors made investigators suspect that the fire was not accidental. Of course, Derek is quickly being interrogated. Although he had recovered from the initial shock, he was still disoriented. Nevertheless, he answered the detectives' questions coherently. He claimed the fire was likely caused by an accident. He explained that he had let his wife sleep in that morning, allowing her to rest after a long work week. They had no plans that day except to relax. While she slept, he decided to run to the store, hoping to return before she woke up. Before leaving for the store, Derek attempted to make breakfast but noticed that the pipes were frozen. He went to the basement to adjust the heating system, which ran on flammable propane. According to him, the equipment had a malfunction, which could have allowed dangerous gas to leak into the utility room. Despite this, there were no apparent fire sources in the basement, as the wiring was concealed. Due to the complete destruction of the house, investigators struggled to verify Derek's account. Forensic experts and fire service specialists meticulously examined the evidence. They determined the fire started in the basement but could not identify the precise cause. Although Derek's story sounded logical, detectives remained skeptical, suspecting that something did not add up. To confirm his alibi, they asked him to provide receipts from the grocery store. Derek complied and handed over the receipt, but law enforcement still viewed him with suspicion. They theorized he might have tampered with the equipment or even set the house on fire intentionally before leaving for the store to create an alibi. Their suspicions were heightened by scratches they noticed on Derek's face during the interrogation. When questioned, he explained that the scratches were likely from clearing debris on Friday. Lacking concrete evidence against Derek, the authorities had no choice but to release him. However, the investigation remains ongoing due to suspicions that the fire might not have been an accident, especially considering the severity of it. Investigators are looking into other possibilities and are closely analyzing Derek's statements. In the garage, where there were fewer flammable materials, providing some protection from the fire, Roxanne's car was found. The police noticed that the car battery's wires were disconnected and speculated that this could have caused a spark. They theorized that the fire might have started when gas that had accumulated in the basement ignited. During this time, construction work on the house had left one wall partially dismantled, allowing an influx of oxygen. Fire experts believed this provided the conditions for gas to seep into the garage, creating a point of ignition. They also suggested that the unfinished state of the building may have accelerated the fire's spread. However, further investigation revealed no evidence linking the car or its battery to the fire. Surprisingly, the car was undamaged, which seemed unlikely if it had been the source of the blaze. The investigation then shifted to a new clue. In the basement, near the heating equipment, investigators discovered a pile of burnt pellets of unknown origin. This pile appeared to have been deliberately placed near the fire's point of origin. Initially, it was unclear what the substance was or how it might have fueled the fire. 3 days later, forensic scientists identified the pellets as cat litter. Although Derek and Roxanne had cats, their litter boxes were never kept in the basement. This raised suspicions that the placement of the litter near the heating equipment had been intentional. Detectives suspected that Derek might have used the cat litter to start the fire, but they initially couldn't determine how. Further analysis confirmed that the pellets matched the type of litter Derek and Roxanne used. A bag of the same litter was found in the house, but it had been stored far from the basement's point of origin. It was confirmed that Derek had purchased and stored this litter in his office before bringing it home. Initially, the litter was kept far from the basement. However, evidence suggested that Derek might have deliberately poured some of the litter near the heating equipment to fuel the fire. The issue was that cat litter, made from compressed sawdust, doesn't burn easily. This raised a puzzling question: how could such a small amount of litter cause a fire that destroyed the entire farm residence? A detective, who had been a Boy Scout in his youth, offered a possible explanation. He mentioned that in his Boy Scout days, counselors demonstrated survival techniques, including a trick for starting fires. It involved soaking materials to aid in ignition. Interestingly, Derek had also been a Boy Scout and might have been familiar with this fire-starting method. However, despite investigators' efforts to prove the fire was arson, they found no conclusive evidence to confirm their suspicions. Much of the evidence had been destroyed in the fire. Derek denied any involvement in the blaze, but investigators needed proof of his innocence or guilt. They brought in specially trained dogs to search the scene for flammable or explosive materials, suspecting that an accelerant like gasoline might have been used to start the fire. Given the extent of the destruction, these tools were essential. Yet even after a thorough search of the ashes, the dogs found no traces of accelerants. Tests on substances like the cat litter produced no reaction either. Investigators also looked into Derek and Roxanne's personal lives but found nothing suspicious. There were no signs that Derek or his wife, Roxanne, had enemies, and those who knew them described them as a respectable couple with a happy marriage. No one could believe that Derek might be involved in such a crime. Forensic experts from the armed forces continued their investigation at the scene. Slowly, suspicions began to take shape. Near Roxanne's body, investigators discovered a melted pistol. Its presence raised questions. Why was a weapon there? Derek explained that it could have fallen from its storage spot near the bed. The bedroom contained several legally registered firearms for self-defense. A forensic examination suggested that Roxanne might have died from a gunshot wound. However, no bullets were recovered, and the fire had destroyed much of the evidence. The poor condition of Roxanne's body made it difficult to definitively prove or disprove whether a firearm had been used, leaving investigators with unanswered questions. The final report from the forensic expert provided important clues. According to the expert, Roxanne's lungs contained no soot, confirming the investigators' suspicion. She had not inhaled smoke and must have died before the fire started. Additionally, no carbon monoxide was found in her blood, further supporting this conclusion. Unfortunately, due to the condition of the remains, the exact cause of death could not be determined. Despite this, the detectives were convinced they were investigating a murder. The circumstances strongly suggested foul play. It was unlikely that a young and healthy woman would remain trapped in bed during a fire unless something violent had occurred beforehand. Furthermore, The fire appeared to be a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence and cover up the crime. Upon closer examination, traces of blood were discovered in Roxanne's lungs, which the forensic expert believed may have resulted from a severe head injury that caused internal bleeding. This suggested that she had inhaled her own blood, which further reinforced the theory of a violent death. The key question now was, who could have killed Roxanne in the short window between Derek leaving the house and the fire starting? It seemed highly improbable that a random attacker had chosen this exact moment to strike. Investigators decided to delve deeper into Derek and Roxanne's lives to uncover any potential motives. They learned that Roxanne and Derek frequently argued, primarily over financial matters. Derek had grown frustrated with his wife's spending habits, which stemmed from her passion for horses. She had recently purchased an expensive horse, and its upkeep costs were significant. She also invested additional money into training for equestrian competitions, which demanded even more of her time and resources. Not only was this expensive, it also took up a large portion of her time and energy, leaving Derek feeling abandoned. Matters worsened a week before the tragedy when Derek's employer informed him of his upcoming promotion to a managerial position that required him to relocate. Although this was a major career advancement for Derek, it introduced even more tension into their marriage as their disagreements intensified. The problem was clear. Derek's new office was located approximately 200 kilometers away, and Roxanne was adamantly opposed to moving because of her horses. This conflict sparked several heated arguments, as confirmed by Roxanne's relatives. However, there were no prior indications of violence or cruelty, and no one suspected foul play. Roxanne's younger sister, who maintained frequent contact with her, revealed that she had planned to remain at the farmhouse. She had suggested that Derek rent an apartment near his new workplace and return home on weekends. Predictably, Derek disliked this arrangement and tried to convince Roxanne to sell the farm and move with him. She disagreed, causing tension in the family to rise. At the fire scene, forensic experts discovered that a gas hose connected to the heating system had been detached, resulting in a gas leak. Derek claimed the hose may have become dislodged during the fire, possibly when a firefighter accidentally pulled it. However, the hose was fitted with a threaded connector, which made it clear that it could not have simply come loose. Moreover, there was no visible damage to the hose, indicating that it had been deliberately unscrewed. Further forensic analysis of the ashes confirmed that the fire at the Roxanne residence was an act of arson. Once investigators received the official report, suspicions of Derek's involvement in his wife's murder were strengthened. The remaining evidence, however scant, now needs to be linked to him. Police have asked him to provide his clothing for further analysis. It was recalled that, on the day of the interrogation, a suspicious dark stain appeared on Derek's pants. Initially, this detail was overlooked, as the case had not yet been classified as a murder. However, as the investigation progressed, the stain gained significance. Derek claimed it was just dirt from working on his car and denied it could be blood. Subsequent testing revealed that the stain was indeed blood, and it belonged to Roxanne. This discovery exposed Derek's lie and reinforced the police's suspicions. In March 1996, following a month-long investigation into Roxanne's death, Derek was arrested and charged with arson and murder. From the outset, he maintained his innocence, even displaying arrogance toward authorities. He treated the trial like a chess game, casually discussing it with his friends and colleagues. The prosecution argued that on the day of the murder, Derek and Roxanne had another dispute, possibly about moving or their horses. They alleged that, in a fit of rage, he attacked and killed his wife. This claim was supported by suspicious scratches on his face, which appeared shortly before his police interrogation. The scratches resembled nail marks, but defense witnesses testified that, on the morning of February 4, 1996, Derek had been dealing with a neighbor's pets and had an altercation with their dog. Four individuals corroborated this account, suggesting the scratches could have occurred naturally. The prosecution countered with inconsistencies in Derek's explanations. At one point, he claimed the scratches were from cleaning the yard and scraping against branches. However, investigators concluded the injuries may have occurred on different days. Witnesses and Derek's lawyer offered explanations for the various marks, including the dog altercation and yard work. Despite these accounts, attention shifted to more incriminating evidence: the bloodstain on Derek's trousers. Initially, it was theorized that Derek might have been injured during the dog incident and accidentally left the bloodstain. However, forensic experts have dismissed this idea, asserting that the pattern of the bloodstains does not match the wound caused by a bite or scratch. Instead, the evidence suggested the stain resulted from a direct physical attack, possibly by Derek. In his defense, he argued that Roxanne occasionally wore his trousers while horseback riding, as they had a similar build. He speculated that she might have injured herself while riding and wiped her blood onto the pants. He maintained that he had no direct knowledge of how the bloodstain got there. The defense contended that the blood on the trousers could not conclusively link Derek to the murder, as it was unclear when the stain appeared. To reinforce this view, they invited an independent forensic expert to analyze and present a report. The expert said Roxanne had inhaled more blood than initially thought, indicating she had suffered a prolonged beating, severe facial injuries that did not kill her immediately, leading to severe bleeding. The horrifying details of Roxanne's suffering and the state of her burned body added emotional weight to the prosecution's case. However, the defense attorney emphasized that the evidence was circumstantial and based largely on assumptions rather than concrete proof, which was particularly significant given Derek's previously good reputation. The defense highlighted Derek's favorable character, arguing that no one in his life had ever seen him act aggressively or inappropriately. He was widely described as friendly, adaptable, and easygoing, despite his recent disagreements with Roxanne. Witnesses testified that he and his wife shared a loving relationship, built on mutual understanding. At work, Derek was known as a hardworking, successful IT professional who advanced quickly in his career. Neighbors described him as polite and respectful, and he had no prior legal troubles, especially not involving violence. Despite his declarations of innocence, investigators continued to scrutinize inconsistencies in his statements. Derek, despite not being interested in horses, supported his wife by helping her build a stable and a riding area, and even by joining her in equestrian classes. Following the trial's closing arguments, the jury deliberated for over 12 hours but couldn't reach a verdict. This was largely due to the forensic scientists' failure to determine the exact cause of Roxanne's death. Without conclusive evidence, Derek was not convicted of premeditated murder. However, he was found guilty of arson and negligent homicide based on his own admission that he had turned the heating system to its maximum setting and neglected to check on his wife. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Throughout the trial, he maintained his innocence and criticized the prosecution as unjust, frequently venting his frustrations to friends and colleagues. After the sentencing, public opinion largely sided with the prosecution, as the charges seemed justified. Derek served his 10-year sentence and was released on November 30, 2006, under mandatory supervision for 3 years, which he completed without any issues. After his release, he started his life over, found a new job, and, on October 15, 2010, remarried Janine, a local radio presenter. Janine firmly believed in Derek's innocence and described him as a loving, caring husband who gave her no reason to feel unsafe. Since his release, he has had no legal troubles. Despite his conviction, Derek continues to assert his innocence, maintaining that he was wrongfully accused. Although his efforts to appeal and clear his name have failed, he has expressed gratitude for the chance to rebuild his life and for the support of friends and family who stood by him. Questions about Roxanne's death remain unresolved. Was it truly an accident, or could a stranger have been involved? Share your thoughts in the comments.
Not all relationships are healthy. Some can be harmful, leave lasting emotional and physical damage. This is the troubling story of a romance between a prominent dentist and her coworker. From the beginning, their relationship displayed signs of turmoil. Over nearly 5 years, they broke up and reconciled multiple times. Despite the ups and downs, she remained optimistic, giving him numerous opportunities. In reality, he never truly let her go. He employed various forms of emotional manipulation, pressure, and psychological control to keep her close. When she finally gathered the strength to take charge of her life and informed him of her decision to move on for good, it triggered a series of events with catastrophic consequences. Preeti Reddy was born in the lively Indian city of Pimpri Chinchwad, located along the Pavana River. The family enjoyed a comfortable life due to her parents' stable and substantial income. Preeti grew up with her younger sister Nithya. From a young age, the sisters developed a strong bond and were almost inseparable. They shared everything: childhood secrets, dreams, and challenges. Their parents created a loving environment, emphasizing strong cultural values and respect for family. As financially secure individuals, their parents were committed to investing in their daughter's well-being and future. Education was a top priority in the Reddy home. The girls were given every opportunity to thrive. In 1996, the Reddy family made a significant change by moving to Australia in search of better opportunities and a brighter future. They settled in a quiet suburb of Sydney and bought a spacious home that quickly became their refuge. Preeti and Nithya started attending a well-regarded private school, where both thrived academically. Preeti developed into a bright, charismatic young woman who was friendly, sociable, and ambitious. From an early age, and she aspired to follow her parents' path in healthcare, finding true joy in helping others and making a positive impact. After finishing high school, Preeti made an unexpected decision to return to India to study dentistry at a medical university in New Delhi. Her parents, always supportive, trusted her choices and allowed her the freedom to decide for herself. By 2019, Preeti had earned her degree and returned to Sydney, where she moved back in with her family. She started working at the Dental and Physiotherapy Centre in Western Sydney, while also enhancing her skills at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne. Later, she joined Glenbrook Dental, a comprehensive care clinic where she worked as a general practitioner. Highly skilled and passionate about her profession, Dr. Preeti Reddy was recognized by her colleagues and patients as a rising star in dentistry. She was committed to continuous learning and improving her expertise. In early 2013, just before a major life event, she was enrolled in specialized courses for dental implants, hoped to open her own clinic in Melbourne. Unfortunately, those dreams would remain unfulfilled. While still studying at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne, Preeti met a young dentist named Harshwardhan Nard, whom his friends called Harshwardhan Nard. He, like Preeti, was of Indian descent and came from a family of healthcare professionals. Following their tradition by pursuing a career in dentistry, the two quickly connected, feeling an attraction toward each other almost right away. A few months into their friendship, they started dating, but early on, some warning signs emerged. Harshwardhan was possessive and had a quick temper. He frequently questioned Preeti's choices, emotionally manipulated her, and tried to control her subtly. He also undermined her confidence, making her feel inadequate or inferior. He often blamed her for his struggles and claimed she was the source of his pain. Nithya, Preeti's younger sister, was the first to sense that something was wrong. She knew Preeti was dating someone, but Preeti had never introduced him to the family. She never brought him home and avoided talking about him. At the same time, Preeti's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, insecure, and distant. The spark in her eyes faded, turning her from a joyful and confident woman into someone who seemed tense, under emotional strain. Harshwardhan was controlling the relationship, and Preeti appeared trapped. Their parents often asked to meet this man in Preeti's life, but she consistently changed the subject or refused to discuss it. It was clear that she felt uncomfortable in the relationship, yet she remained emotionally tied to Harshwardhan and found it difficult to escape. Harshwardhan lived in Tamworth and worked at a dental clinic. He was in a long-distance relationship with Preeti, as they never lived together. Deep down, she felt that their relationship wouldn't end well. It was unstable, filled with frequent arguments and emotional tension, leaving Preeti feeling overwhelmed. For a long time, she kept their relationship a secret. It wasn't until about 6 months in that she shared it with a few close friends. Preeti's sister, Nithya, met Harshwardhan a few times and immediately disliked him. She later remembered feeling that there was something unsettling about his presence. By 2014, Preeti and Harshwardhan were publicly acknowledged as a couple, but their relationship remained complicated. Preeti never introduced him to her parents and refused to meet his family. Soon after, they broke up, but Preeti chose to keep it private. This cycle of breaking up and getting back together continued for years. At times, she wouldn't inform anyone about their breakups, and at other times, she wouldn't admit they had reconciled. It became clear that she felt embarrassed by their unstable relationship. Harshvardhan often accused Preeti of not investing enough in their relationship and pushed her to move to Tamworth so they could live together. However, Preeti was resolute. She didn't want to abandon her career or leave her family in Sydney. Meanwhile, Harshvardhan was unwilling to move for her. In the fall of 2016, Preeti and Harshvardhan broke up again. Preeti wanted it to be final this time, but Harshvardhan wasn't ready to let go. In October, he started planning a surprise party for her upcoming 30th birthday. However, the surprise did not happen because Preeti had already organized a celebration at her parents' house, invited close friends and colleagues, deliberately excluding Harshvardhan. Despite this clear message, Harshvardhan continued to try to re-enter her life. He pleaded for another chance, insisting that he had changed and that things would be different this time. Although he had never been physically aggressive, his constant emotional pressure had caused Preeti significant distress. This lack of visible harm may have contributed to Preeti deciding to give him one last opportunity, hoping for a fresh start. However, things did not improve. Preeti still had emotional feelings for Harshvardhan, which made it difficult to cut ties completely. Additionally, Harshvardhan manipulated her emotions, making her feel guilty for the end of their relationship. In 2018, Preeti made one last attempt to save her relationship, but soon realized that no matter how much she tried or sacrificed, nothing was going to change. That fall, she decided to end it for good. Just a few weeks later, in November, she met a young physician from Melbourne, and they quickly formed a genuine connection. This new man was everything Harshvardhan was not: kind, attentive, and compassionate. For the first time in years, Preeti was open about her relationship, proudly introducing him to her family and friends. She felt truly happy and hopeful about the future. She even considered moving to Melbourne to be closer to him by applying for jobs in the area. Prestigious dental centers quickly responded to her applications, and after receiving multiple offers, she chose a clinic where she hoped to work after completing her responsibilities in Sydney. In December, she excitedly told her friends that she had never felt this way before. She had finally moved on from her past. Her loved ones were delighted to see her so happy. But unfortunately, this joy was short-lived. In January, Harshvardhan found out that Preeti was in a new relationship. Overwhelmed by jealousy and anger, he began contacting her again through calls and messages, hoping to meet her. However, Preeti had decided to move on and ignored all of his attempts to reach her. By February, during a phone conversation with his brother, Harshvardhan admitted that he couldn't accept what he felt was a betrayal. He spoke about Preeti as if she were still his, viewing her new relationship as a personal insult. He expressed that he wouldn't let her marry someone else and suggested he might take extreme actions. At the time, his words seemed like mere bitter threats, stemming from frustration and a sense of powerlessness. On March 31st, 2019, Sydney hosted a two-day international dental conference showcasing the latest advancements in dentistry. Dr. Preeti attended the conference and stayed at the Swissôtel Hotel with two close friends and colleagues. Her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Harshvardhan, also rented a room at this hotel. After the first day, Preeti shared with her friends that she felt uneasy because Harshvardhan was watching her closely throughout the conference and seemed to be waiting for a chance to talk to her. His behavior was making her feel uncomfortable and unpredictable. Later that evening, the friends went to a nightclub to relax, but Preeti still felt anxious and kept looking over her shoulder. The second day was filled with even more tension as Harshvardhan insisted they meet and talk. Preeti felt anxious and conflicted, while her friends urged her not to give in despite their concerns. After the conference, she reluctantly decided to speak with Harshvardhan, hoping to resolve their issues. She had practiced what she wanted to say, wishing he would listen and put an end to the drama so she could continue with her life. At around 6:30 p.m. on March 2nd, surveillance cameras recorded a gray Volkswagen Golf, which belonged to Pretty, leaving the underground garage of Swissatel Hotel. Pretty was driving, and Harshward Han was seated next to her. About an hour later, they arrived at the Ravi's Cumin Indian restaurant in nearby Crow's Nest and entered together. Witnesses, including other diners and restaurant staff, noted that there was significant tension at their table. Pretty looked anxious and wanted to leave, while Harshwardhan tried to hold her hand and interrupted her as she spoke. The waiter in charge of their table recalled that Preeti mentioned she was planning to move to Melbourne, confessed to being in love with someone else, and asked Harshwardhan to let her go. Despite this, Harshwardhan seemed unaware of her feelings. He continued to talk about marriage and promised to move to Sydney just to be close to her. Around 10:16 p.m., they left the restaurant and walked to their car but didn't get in. They argued for over an hour at that spot. Surveillance cameras show Harshwardhan reaching out towards Preeti, then pushing her as she backed away and took a step back, causing her to stumble. They finally drove off close to midnight and spent another 15 minutes driving around the city before stopping in a mall parking lot. Neither of them got out of the car. Surveillance cameras on the building captured them in a heated argument, with Harshwardhan making wild gestures and Preeti crying visibly. At about 2 p.m., Preeti got out of the car and entered a 24-hour fast food restaurant in the mall. She bought a bottle of water and waited near the entrance, seemingly for Harshwardhan to come out. However, when she went back, he was still sitting in the car. They then drove to the Swissatel Hotel. He quietly led Preeti past the front desk and into his suite. After around 3 a.m., she did not leave. On the morning of March 3rd, around 10 a.m., Preeti called her younger sister to say she would be home in a couple of hours. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Her family expected her to be home by lunchtime, but she never arrived. It was unusual for her phone to be off. By 3 p.m., worry turned into panic. Preeti was always in contact and would inform someone if she was running late. Her family quickly began reaching out to her friends and coworkers to find out where she might be. It was then they discovered that she had been seen at a conference with her ex, Harshwardhan, who was reportedly trying to reconnect with her and had been persistent. Nithya attempted to call Harshwardhan, but he either ignored her calls or didn't answer, even though his phone was still on. On the evening of March 3rd, the Reddy family went to the police to report Preeti missing, expressing their concerns that her ex-boyfriend might be involved. Simultaneously, they began their own search by reaching out to anyone who might have seen or talked to Preeti. Nithya also posted on social media, sharing recent photos and asking for any information to help locate her sister. Within 24 hours, her post reached nearly 2,000 people, including Preeti's former patients. Many offered to assist in the search or to help spread the word, but no one had any concrete information about Preeti's location. The only potential lead remained Harshwardhan, who continued to avoid answering calls. On the afternoon of March 4th, Harshwardhan finally took one of Nithya's calls. He responded in a disturbingly calm manner, stating that Preeti was an adult who would return soon. He acknowledged seeing her at the conference but claimed they had only spoken briefly before going their separate ways. Oddly, just an hour later, Harshwardhan called Nithya back, this time very angry. He yelled at her, asking why she was contacting his friends, family, and co-workers about Preeti. He accused the Reddy family of unfairly blaming him and damaging his reputation without any proof. His reaction raised serious concerns, while he showed little worry about Preeti's sudden disappearance or the possibility that she might be in danger. He seemed more upset that people were searching for her and that attention was being directed at him. After discovering the situation, it was clear that Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, and he likely became the last person to see her. Harshwardhan's family urged him to go to the police and provide a full account before any formal summons. Later that day, he went to a police station in Sydney, saying he wanted to assist and share what he knew. Officers quickly noticed his unusual behavior. He was sweating, visibly anxious, and pacing while gesturing wildly. He claimed to have seen Preeti not only at a conference but also during dinner on March 2nd. He stated that they had a final conversation that helped them both move on, and that he called her a cab which he said was the last time he saw her. However, there were inconsistencies in his story. When asked to repeat the events, he became confused, contradicted himself, and struggled to keep his timeline consistent. Despite his odd behavior, the police had no solid evidence to detain him, so they let him go. Before he left, a detective casually mentioned that they were examining surveillance footage that might show the movements of both Preeti and Harshwardhan that evening, intending to reconstruct the timeline. This statement appeared to unsettle Harshwardhan. A few hours later, he returned to the police station and changed his story. He confessed that he hadn't called a cab for Preeti. She had actually driven herself in her own car, which was the same Volkswagen Golf they had used to go to the restaurant. When questioned about why he had initially lied, he said he was nervous and didn't think those details were important. Later that day, on March 4th, news reported a serious car accident on the New England highway. A BMW had sped into oncoming traffic and collided head-on with a truck. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene and was identified as Dr. Harshwardhan Nard. This raised the question, how did he end up in such a terrible accident on a mostly empty road? Surveillance footage showed that Harshwardhan had quickly sped up and deliberately driven into the truck's path. This incident appeared to be an act of self-harm, and further evidence soon supported this idea. It was evident that the detective's mention of the footage had left Harshwardhan visibly shaken. He likely understood that investigators would soon reconstruct the events of the entire evening. The day after Harshwardhan's death, Preeti's abandoned Volkswagen Golf was discovered in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Sydney. Inside the trunk, in a large blue suitcase, was her lifeless body. Forensic investigators later confirmed that she had suffered a severe head injury and multiple stab wounds, 11 in total, mostly to her neck and back. 2 days later, after reviewing security footage and interviewing witnesses, the police were able to piece together the events of March 2nd. Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, likely seeking closure and trying to move on from their relationship. A waiter, who overheard parts of their conversation, remembered that Preeti appeared upset and frightened. After dinner, they drove around for a few hours before arriving at Swissatel Hotel. It is suspected that he emotionally manipulated her, a tactic he had used in the past, making her feel guilty. Since she was never seen leaving the hotel, detectives believe that the tragic event likely took place in the room. A forensic investigation uncovered traces of blood in the bathroom, although it had been cleaned so thoroughly that housekeeping noticed nothing unusual. It is thought that Preeti went to the bathroom to call her new partner, and that Harshwardhan, overhearing the call, became enraged. Once she ended the call, he attacked her from behind, hitting her on the head and then inflicting multiple wounds with a sharp object. After finishing what he had to do, Harshwardhan calmly cleaned himself up and went to the front desk to extend his stay for another night. He had breakfast in the hotel restaurant before heading out to shop at local stores. There, he bought a large blue suitcase and various cleaning supplies. He returned to his hotel room around 5 p.m., checked out, and when a staff member offered to help with his luggage, they remarked that the suitcase seemed quite heavy. Harshwardhan casually explained that he had bought too many gifts for his family. He then loaded his belongings into Preeti's Volkswagen Golf and drove to a quiet corner of the city, where he parked the car in a discreet spot, hoping it would remain unnoticed for some time. After everything that happened, Harshwardhan picked up his BMW from the parking garage and drove home to Tamworth. On the way, he stopped at a gas station to fill his tank and grab some coffee. Several witnesses later identified him there, noting that his phone kept ringing, but he either declined the calls or ignored them. It was later confirmed that those calls were from Nithya, who was desperately trying to contact him while looking for her sister. Harshwardhan likely thought he had committed the perfect crime, covering his tracks so well that investigators wouldn't be able to connect him to anything. He hadn't considered that there were surveillance cameras at almost every place he and Preeti had gone that day. Those recordings would soon reveal the truth. When Harshwardhan understood his error, that the police would have clear evidence of his involvement, he decided not to wait for an arrest or trial. Instead, he took control of the situation and ended his life before justice could catch up with him. Harshwardhan's family, despite the increasing evidence against him, struggled to accept the idea that he could commit such a terrible act. They found it hard to believe he could take another person's life in such a brutal and deliberate way. Meanwhile, the Reddy family, grieving the loss of their cherished daughter and sister, decided to take action. They started a campaign to create the first center in Australia focused on helping women impacted by domestic violence. This center would not only provide emotional support, but also offer safe housing, legal advice, and help for those trying to leave abusive or manipulative relationships. The Reddy family played a key role in supporting the project by providing funding, using their voices to raise public awareness through media and outreach. They made sure that people in need were aware of a safe place to go, where they could find both protection and support for healing. It was a quiet night in the small town of Matapalo, Guanacaste, but inside one house, a terrible event was unfolding. A man had just assaulted his partner, while a child nearby attempted to escape. Suddenly, everything went silent. What occurred in that house? And how did the little girl manage to survive? Jessica Duran grew up in Costa Rica. From a young age, she experienced neglect, not because she lacked family, but due to a lack of proper care. Locals often saw her wandering the streets barefoot, unkempt, and hungry, frequently asking for food. She dropped out of school early and soon became involved in addiction. By age 13, she was often seen in local bars, dressed provocatively, smoking marijuana, drinking beer, and seeking clients. When she turned 20, she became pregnant for the first time. Little is known about that child, except that reports indicate the baby was taken in by the paternal grandmother. A year later, Jessica met a man at a bar. He was also using banned substance, and they began a tumultuous relationship. After 3 years, Jessica became pregnant again. However, before the baby was born, he was arrested and imprisoned for attempted homicide. Once again, the paternal grandmother took care of the baby. Despite the man being in prison, their relationship continued. During one conjugal visit, Jessica became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. This time, she was able to keep the child. Jessica and her daughter were homeless until an old friend offered them shelter. To support herself, Jessica returned to escort. Jessica then met Dirk Beauchamp, an American who had visited Costa Rica multiple times. He became very attached to her, and they soon moved in together. However, concerns arose when neighbors noticed that Jessica's daughter was being left alone for long periods. Eventually, the couple was evicted and moved to a new home in Matapalo. Jessica's family grew and she had 3 more children. Dirk accepted all 4 children, including Jessica's stepdaughter, and gave them his last name, Beauchamp. The community viewed him as a dedicated father, often seen walking his children to school, taking them to music lessons, and spending afternoons with them in the local plaza. However, Jessica had not changed. She continued to struggle with substance use, leading to noticeable drinking and erratic behavior that concerned neighbors. Meanwhile, the grandmother of her second child filed for child support. Jessica ignored the legal notice and was ultimately imprisoned in 2015 at El Buen Pastor, a women's prison in Costa Rica. While she was in jail, Dirk had to care for all 4 children by himself. Those who knew the family said he faced difficulties and sometimes couldn't provide even basic meals. Social workers from the National Child Welfare Agency came to evaluate the family's situation, but Dirk claimed everything was fine, likely out of fear that the authorities would take the children away. While still in prison, Jessica met a man named Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva. After she was released, she returned home not only pregnant with Michael's child, but also with him by her side. This marked the beginning of a new and tumultuous chapter in Jessica's life. She was open about her relationship with Michael, expressing how deeply in love she was with him, despite their shared struggles with addiction. Michael set up a makeshift living space next to the Beauchamp family home and moved freely between both residences, treating them as one. Even Jessica's mother disapproved of the relationship, which prompted Jessica to cut off all contact with her. Dirk, an older and naturally quiet man who avoids conflict, put up with the situation to remain near his children. He also welcomed Jessica's new baby, her daughter with Michael, into their home. However, as time passed, neighbors started to see a shift in Dirk. His previously warm and lively demeanor diminished. He looked more tired and was visibly affected, both physically and emotionally, by the unstable environment he was living in. On the morning of February 16, 2016 at 8:40 a.m., a social worker from the Costa Rican Social Security Fund arrived at the Beauchamp residence for a routine welfare check. He had visited this home many times to check on the children's health and ensure the family had basic support. However, this time felt different. The house was completely sealed and disturbingly quiet, with vultures circling overhead. Worried, he approached a nearby man who was taking care of livestock and asked if the silence was typical. The man shook his head. The children usually played outside. They moved closer to the fence, and then they heard it, a child crying inside. There were no other sounds, no voices, and no movement. Realizing the urgency of the situation, he quickly called emergency services. When the officers arrived, they heard a child's crying coming from beyond the fence. They shouted, threw stones onto the roof, and tried to get a response from inside, but no one answered. Realizing they couldn't wait any longer, they forced open the outer gate and carefully approached the house. Looking through a window, they saw a young girl crouched on the floor, her clothes dirty. They checked another window, which was swarming with flies, and noticed that her clothing was stained with blood. They used a metal bar to pry open a door, with their weapons ready, unsure if the attacker was still inside. As they moved closer to the child, they saw she had injuries on her head. All she requested was water. They surveyed the area and were horrified to find the mutilated body of an adult male nearby. It was Dirk. The officers moved further into the house. In the first bedroom, they found two bodies under a blood-stained sheet, Jessica and her 6-year-old daughter, both lying in a pool of blood. Disturbed, the officers stepped back and headed to the back of the house, where they heard a baby's cries. In a separate room, they discovered a 6-month-old infant lying alone on a bed. Fortunately, she seemed unharmed. Even though they feared the attacker might still be inside, they continued their investigation. In the bathroom, they found the body of the oldest daughter. She was partially undressed and had multiple injuries. There was still one last room to check. Inside, there was more blood, with streaks and splatters leading to an adjacent bathroom. There, they found a boy's body. The house was silent now. No one else was there. The officers radioed their station to report the tragic scene. The little girl, who had been asking for water, finally received a drink. She attempted to sit up, but her injuries made it very difficult for her to move. First responders advised her to stay still, as they understood her injuries were likely more serious than they looked. While authorities gathered evidence and removed bodies from the Beauchamp home, the two young survivors of the tragic event were quickly taken to the hospital. The 4-year-old girl was in critical condition, barely conscious, and had multiple stab wounds to her chest, abdomen, arms, and head. Her 6-month-old sister was stable but severely dehydrated, having gone nearly 48 hours without food or water. Both girls were then transferred to the National Children's Hospital in San Jose for additional treatment. A year later, the police officer who responded to the scene reflected on the experience. There had been signs of trouble before. Jessica had filed a domestic violence complaint against her partner, Michael. Given the chaotic situation at home, Michael, who is 24 years old, became the main suspect in a case involving 5 murders. The bodies were found on February 16th, but forensic evidence indicated that the murders happened 2 days earlier, on the night of February 14th, Valentine's Day. Investigators quickly started to trace Michael's steps. Security footage from a store about 700 meters from his home showed that he visited 3 times that night, purchasing beer, soft drinks, cigarettes, and a phone card. Knowing that Michael could potentially escape the country, Costa Rican authorities issued an international arrest warrant the following day. Michael had a prior history of aggravated theft in Costa Rica. With an extradition request now in place, the search for him intensified. Within 48 hours, Nicaraguan authorities confirmed his arrest. While officials initially credited police efforts for the capture, Michael's father later disclosed that he was the one who turned him in. He claimed that Michael admitted to killing Jessica and the children out of jealousy while under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Despite his father's assertions of remorse, Michael did not display any emotion in the days after his arrest. When he was presented to the media, he appeared emotionless, maintaining a cold demeanor and showing no signs of regret. Michael was detained at the prison in Nicaragua as he awaited his trial. On March 30th, a pre-trial hearing took place, attended by Costa Rican officials. The highlight of this hearing was the expected testimony from Jessica's daughter, the living witness to the massacre, who is only 4 years old. She connected through video from the Children's Hospital in Costa Rica, along with a judge and a psychologist. During her testimony, she clearly identified Michael as the person responsible for the attacks. She recounted how he first stabbed her mother, followed by Dirk, and then her siblings. She described the violent events in disturbing detail, even specifying the body parts where each family member had been injured. Throughout this, Michael remained completely still. Extradition was quickly dismissed as an option. Similar to Costa Rica, Nicaragua's constitution does not allow the extradition of its own citizens for trial in other countries. As a result, Michael's trial would happen in Nicaragua. Costa Rican officials began sending all relevant evidence, witness statements, and investigative documents to their Nicaraguan counterparts to facilitate the legal process. On April 19th, a preliminary hearing was held. The prosecutor presented the charges in distressing detail: 5 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 1 count of aggravated abuse, and 1 count of endangering a person's safety. On the night of February 14th, the official report states that Michael entered the bedroom where Jessica was sleeping next to her 6-year-old daughter. He was armed with a kitchen knife and stabbed Jessica twice, once in the collarbone and once in the chest. As Jessica fell, the girl tried to help her mother but was attacked by Michael, who stabbed her 5 times in the back. Michael then turned his focus to Dirk, hearing the screams. Dirk grabbed a second kitchen knife to protect his family. However, he could not compete with Michael, who was younger, stronger, and fueled by something evil. Dirk initially sustained minor injuries, but then Michael struck with deadly accuracy. He stabbed Dirk in the left arm, made deep cuts to his neck and side of his head, and delivered 8 brutal blows to his back, another 8 to his chest. In total, Dirk suffered 19 stab wounds that led to his death. Michael's violent rampage turned into a horrific nightmare. He targeted 8-year-old Jessica's son, who tried to escape to his bedroom but was cornered. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, the boy was slashed on the hand. Though he made it to the bathroom, Michael continued to attack, stabbing him 3 times in the back, 7 times in the chest, hitting his lungs and heart. Next, he turned his attention to 12-year-old another girl, who was hiding in a locked room. Michael broke in and stabbed her 3 times in the back before abusing her. The brutality escalated as he struck her 9 times in the head and 5 times in the chest. Afterward, he dragged her body to the bathroom, placed it in the shower, and attempted to wash away the blood. The violence persisted. 4-year-old the girl was hiding behind a door in another room. When Michael discovered her, he pulled her by the hair and slammed her against the wall. Then he used a knife, cutting her head, neck, body, and arms. The child lost consciousness, and Michael thought she was dead. He only spared 1 child, 6-month-old. The baby has been his biological daughter, which could explain why she was not harmed. As the prosecutors recounted the events in court, the atmosphere was filled with disbelief and sorrow. Everyone, except for Michael, listened intently to the horrific details, while Michael remained expressionless. In the meantime, the bodies of Jessica and her children were returned to her family, with Jessica's mother taking responsibility for their burial. Since U.S. authorities could not find any relatives for Dirk, he was buried next to Jessica and her children with her family's permission. The 4-year-old girl faced a challenging path to recovery. A stab wound to her skull had left her partially paralyzed on the left side of her body. She was hospitalized for 3 months, and doctors were hopeful about her physical recovery. However, the emotional scars ran much deeper. She had witnessed her family's brutal murder, endured her own vicious attack, and spent 2 days at the scene before being rescued. The hospital staff affectionately called her the Little Champion as she gradually began to regain her smile and mobility. Like her younger sister, she was placed in a caring, temporary home. Authorities began looking into adoption options, considering keeping the sisters together. Jessica's mother sought custody of the girls, but ultimately, in 2018, Costa Rica's Child Welfare Agency decided that separate adoptions would be in the girls' best interests. They concluded that none of Jessica's family members were equipped to address the girls' complex emotional needs. Given Jessica's own difficult upbringing, officials believed they were making the safest choice for their future. The girls' former home, where the massacre occurred, became a grim landmark. It stood silently, serving as a painful reminder of the tragedy. Locals shared stories of strange occurrences there, including sightings of the family's spirits near the site. Meanwhile, legal proceedings for Michael were moving forward. On June 10, 2016, a special hearing took place where he admitted to the killings. His defense team requested lighter sentences in exchange for his confession, but prosecutors sought the maximum penalties: 25 years for Jessica's femicide, 30 years for Dirk's murder, 15 years for the girl's abuse, plus 30 years for her murder, 30 years for the boy's murder, 30 years for the girl's murder, 20 years for the attempted murder of the girl, and 3 years for abandoning infant. In total, they requested a sentence of 183 years. On July 16, 2017, more than a year after the tragic massacre, justice was served when Nicaraguan judge sentenced Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva to 183 years in prison, meeting the prosecution's request. For the first time, Michael reacted by bowing his head and tapping his fingers on the table, likely contemplating the lengthy prison term ahead. However, under Nicaraguan law, the maximum prison sentence is 30 years, which means Michael could be released at the age of 55 unless laws change. The town of Matapalo will always remember the children who once filled their plaza with laughter, music, and kindness. Dirk, the American father, sacrificed everything to protect the children he loved and died alongside them. Following the tragedy, a debate emerged over who was responsible. Was it solely Michael, the decisions made by Jessica, the impact of banned substance and alcohol, or a broader cycle of neglect and violence that spiraled out of control?
It was early morning in Chapel Hill when two friends returned to their apartment, assuming Faith Hedgepeth was just sleeping in. Her car was parked outside, and the door was unlocked, making everything seem normal. However, as they entered her room, they were shocked by what they found. A blanket covered something on the floor. There was blood on the walls. The room was eerily quiet, but it was evident that something horrific had occurred. There were no signs of forced entry. Security cameras had not captured anyone coming or going, only a few strange late-night texts and some unusual behavior. It was a crime scene that would be etched in their memories forever. What really happened in that apartment? Why did it take so long to catch her killer? Faith Hedgepeth was born on September 26, 1992, in Warren County, North Carolina. She was a proud member of the Haliwa-Saponi Native American tribe. After her parents divorced when she was an infant, her mother, Connie Hedgepeth, and her older sister, Rolanda, played significant roles in her upbringing. Despite the separation, Faith maintained a strong relationship with her father, Roland, who described her as the light that helped him overcome his struggles with addiction. Her birth gave him renewed purpose. Faith was gifted and ambitious, excelling in her studies. She received the prestigious Gates Millennium Scholarship and enrolled at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she initially pursued a degree in biology. Although she faced challenges transitioning to university life, Faith remained determined. She switched her major, worked 2 jobs, and stayed focused on her goal to be the first in her family to graduate from college. She aspired to become either a pediatrician or a teacher, reflecting her compassionate nature. Faith shared an off-campus apartment in Chapel Hill with her friend and former freshman roommate, Karina Rosario. They lived in an apartment at Hawthorne at the View, a complex just minutes from campus. At one point, Karina's boyfriend, Eric Takoi Jones, also stayed with them, but his presence created tension. Their relationship became toxic, characterized by conflict and breakups. Even after Karina changed the locks, Eric tried to break into the apartment twice. With Faith's support, Karina secured a protective order against him. Despite this, Eric moved into another unit in the same complex, remaining disturbingly close. On September 6, 2012, Faith attended her classes and then participated in an event hosted by Alpha Pi Omega, the oldest Native American sorority in the country, which she hoped to join. At 7:15 p.m., she left the event to work on a history paper about her tribe. At 8 p.m., she and Karina went to the campus library. From 8:30 to 9, she exchanged text messages with her father about her hopes of joining a sorority. Faith briefly left and returned at 11:30 p.m. They headed back to their apartment around midnight. Shortly after, they decided to go to The Thrill, a nightclub that allows entry for people under 21. Security footage showed them entering The Thrill at 12:40 a.m. They danced for over an hour before Karina began to feel unwell from drinking. They were recorded leaving at 2:06 a.m., with Faith driving them home. Upon returning to their apartment, Karina reportedly got sick and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., a neighbor heard loud noises from above, which sounded like heavy thuds, similar to furniture being knocked over or a heavy backpack falling. Faith's Facebook account showed activity at around 3:30 a.m. Just 10 minutes later, a text message from Faith's phone was sent to Brandon Edwards, one of Karina's ex-boyfriends. The message said, "Hey B, can you come over here, please? Rosario needs you more. You know, please let her know you care." Brandon replied the next afternoon at 4:16 a.m., asking who had messaged him, but by then, it was too late for a response. No reply ever came. While these messages were sent, Karina's phone also displayed outgoing calls to Brandon. At 3:52 a.m. Karina called Jordan McCrary, a UNC-CH soccer player she knew. At 4:25 a.m., Karina left the apartment and got into McCrary's car. She left the apartment door unlocked because she thought Faith was asleep. The following morning, around 10:30 a.m., Karina tried to contact Faith for a ride back but received no response. So, she reached out to their mutual friend Marisol Rangel, who came to pick her up. They arrived at the apartment just before 11 a.m. and assumed Faith had just slept in. Once inside, they called her name but got no reply. What they discovered in the bedroom was shocking. Faith's body was found partially undressed and covered with a blanket, positioned against the bed. Her shirt had been pulled up over her head, and there were signs of a brutal attack, with blood splattered on the walls, floor, and furniture. A used tampon was also found near her body. There were no signs of forced entry, and unfortunately, no security cameras recorded any activity in or out of the apartment that night. Karina was the one who called 911. When the authorities arrived at the apartment, Faith's death was confirmed at the scene. The crime was extremely brutal. Faith had been violently attacked. In the following days and months after the murder of 19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth, investigators uncovered unsettling details that painted a chilling picture but still raised many questions. One key finding was the presence of semen on Faith's body. DNA testing showed that it matched genetic material found in the bedroom. Although physical evidence suggested a possible abuse assault, the autopsy revealed no significant trauma to the genital area. Nevertheless, the Chapel Hill police leaned toward the belief that Faith had likely been abused, a conclusion supported by her family. An autopsy determined that Hedgepeth died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely caused by being struck by an empty rum bottle in the apartment. The Bacardi rum bottle found at the crime scene became crucial evidence. It contained tissue fragments and DNA, leading investigators to suspect it might have been the murder weapon. Next to Faith's body was a fast food bag from Time Out with a handwritten message, "I'm not stupid," and "jealous." Interestingly, despite the room being covered in blood, the note remained clean. This implies that the killer either wrote it after the attack, taking the time to clean themselves, or placed it there carefully to hide their identity. Handwriting expert Peggy Walla analyzed the note and determined that it was written in a disguised manner, suggesting that the author intentionally altered their handwriting to avoid recognition. Faith's murder deeply affected the Chapel Hill community, where homicides are rare, averaging less than one per year. Police Chief Chris Blue stated that the investigation quickly became one of the largest homicide cases in North Carolina's history. However, updates were scarce for many months, making the search for answers painfully slow for Faith's family. Her mother, Connie, shared that they were not allowed to see Faith's body. Additionally, all information about her death was kept confidential by a court order, which was unusual for the Chapel Hill police. In December 2012, the FBI became involved in the investigation and created a psychological profile of the suspect. They believed that Faith's killer likely knew her and might have lived nearby. It was suspected that the individual took a special interest in the case, possibly discussing it often or showing unusual behavior afterward. By July 2014, after obtaining a court order, the Chapel Hill police released 300 pages of case documents. The autopsy report, which came out in September, confirmed what the family had suspected: Faith died from multiple blows to the head. Her body had numerous cuts and bruises, and blood was found under her fingernails, indicating she had fought for her life. Court documents revealed that during the initial investigation, only 2 apartments were searched, Faith's and one other in the same complex. Some sources claimed that the wooded area behind the apartment was never investigated. Additionally, reports suggested that no search dogs were used, and officers did not canvass the neighborhood to question other residents, which was surprising given the high-profile nature of the case. Faith's phone revealed a possible clue in her case. On the night she died, she called her friend, Marisol Rangel, 3 times, with one of the calls resulting in a voicemail that accidentally recorded while the phone was in her pocket. The message is hard to decipher, but those close to Faith believe it captured a moment of tension. Some think they can hear arguing or a struggle, while others perceive it as background noise from a nightclub. Faith's father, Roland, claims he can detect his daughter's distress in the recording. Journalist Tom Gasparoli became very interested in the case, starting a blog and podcast to help uncover the truth. He collaborated with forensic audio expert Arlo West, who analyzed the voicemail thoroughly. West, experienced in audio enhancement and forensic analysis, found that the recording contained 4 voices, 2 male and 2 female, suggested that the conversation was heated. The voicemail was timestamped at 1:23 a.m., just before Faith was seen leaving the club with her roommate. At 2:07 a.m. on September 7, 2012, surveillance cameras recorded Faith Hedgepath and her roommate leaving the Thrill nightclub. Everything appeared normal at that time. However, as the events of that night were examined, investigators and independent experts started to doubt the accuracy of the digital evidence. Arlo West raised concerns about the timestamp of a voicemail left from Faith's phone at 1:23 a.m., which seemed inconsistent with the nightclub footage. West noted that both Faith and her friend Marisol Rangel had phones that often had timestamp issues. He also pointed out that the local cell towers were unreliable, suggesting the message might have been recorded at a different time. Although the Chapel Hill police agreed to review the enhanced audio version, they maintained confidence in the original metadata, stating they did not believe the recording captured the moment of the murder. Much of the attention also focused on Karina's ex-boyfriend, Barrick, who was known to dislike Faith's influence on Karina and reportedly blamed her for their breakup. Police discovered concerning messages that Eric sent in the hours leading up to the murder. On September 6th, he texted a friend asking for forgiveness for something he was about to do. He also posted a similar message on Twitter. 3 days after Faith was killed, he shared a cryptic post on Facebook, stating, "Dear Lord, forgive me for all my sins and the ones I may commit today. Protect me from the girls who don't deserve me and those who wish me dead today." Investigators seized Eric's vehicle and searched his home, but they found no valuable evidence. His DNA did not match the sample found at the crime scene. Despite his cooperation, the police still considered him a person of interest, suspecting that he might know who was responsible, even if he was not directly involved. In 2015, police in Chapel Hill were hopeful that DNA evidence would eventually lead to an arrest in the case. Although they did not disclose the specific DNA details or its collection location, they maintained a positive outlook. At the same time, Faith's death caused significant fear and sorrow on campus. Memorial vigils were organized, including a traditional Native American ceremony to celebrate her life and spirit. Many students grieved for her, viewing her not just as a friend but as a cultural sister whose joy and compassion had positively impacted many. In 2016, a significant breakthrough renewed interest in the case. A laboratory in Virginia analyzed DNA from the crime scene and created a composite sketch of a potential suspect. This image was developed using forensic phenotyping, which can predict characteristics such as eye color, skin tone, face shape, and likely ancestry. The results suggested that the suspect might be of Native American descent with either European or Latino ancestry. While the sketch was not a definitive identification, it offered investigators and the public a possible face associated with the crime. Several people associated with Faith were investigated in connection with the ongoing case. One of them was a man who left the nightclub with Faith and Karina. He had arrived at the club earlier with 3 companions. All 4 were questioned and provided DNA samples, but none matched the DNA from the crime scene. Faith's father has been very vocal, insisting that Karina knows more than she has shared. Other people have also raised concerns about Karina's actions after Faith's body was found, regarding the 911 call she made. The call lasted over 8 minutes but did not mention Faith by name and omitted the fact that another friend was present in the apartment, giving the impression that Karina was alone. Police have indicated that Karina's account raises several questions, and there are inconsistencies in what she told investigators. One neighbor who saw Karina shortly after the body was discovered remarked that neither girl seemed upset. Complicating matters, Karina had reportedly left the nightclub early because she felt unwell but then left her apartment again just hours later, leaving the front door unlocked. A university soccer player picked her up, and his roommate noticed a small red mark on Karina's clothing that day. Police were alerted and searched for the shirt, but the test results were inconclusive. Authorities could not determine if the stain was blood, nor could they connect Karina directly to the crime. Despite the absence of physical evidence linking her to the murder, Karina has remained a key figure in the investigation. A private investigator, who is closely working with Faith's family, believes that the truth may involve Karina. He speculates that a possible argument between Faith and Karina at the Thrill nightclub, possibly related to a relationship, could have triggered Faith's death. Shortly after the murder, Karina moved out of North Carolina and has not publicly addressed the case. According to Faith's father, Roland, she also stopped returning his calls. Nevertheless, the police state that Karina has always been cooperative when they contacted her. For almost 10 years, the murder of Faith Hedgepeth remained clouded by theories, suspicions, and unanswered questions. Friends, former partners, and acquaintances were all investigated, and despite numerous leads, no arrests were made until 2021. On September 16, 2021, the Chapel Hill Police Department announced they had arrested 28-year-old Miguel Salguero Olivares from Durham, North Carolina. This breakthrough didn't come from tips or interviews, but from DNA collected after Miguel was arrested for a DUI in Wake County the previous month. His DNA profile was entered into the system and matched DNA found at the crime scene nearly 9 years earlier. Additionally, court documents revealed that a palm print found on the suspected murder weapon, a liquor bottle, also matched Miguel, strengthening the case against him. Prior to this discovery, the police had not identified him as a suspect, and his name had not appeared in earlier reports. Police Chief Chris Blue urged the community to be patient, saying, "This story will take time to completely unfold." In November 2024, the case took a significant turn. Prosecutors updated the original charges, adding 3 new ones: first-degree burglary, first-degree abuse, and first-degree abuse offense. These new charges intensified the seriousness of the allegations and clarified what may have happened in Faith's apartment that night. The arrest brought a mix of relief and renewed anguish. After years of uncertainty, a suspect had finally been named, someone now officially accused of causing Faith's death. However, as the legal proceedings began, it started a new phase in the quest for answers. Who was Miguel Salguero Olivares? How did he meet Faith? What exactly occurred in her final moments? For her family, this was a long-awaited step toward justice. Yet, for a community still grieving, it was just the beginning of discovering the complete truth. The Jansen family appeared to be a loving and supportive unit, like many other families. However, one day, everything changed dramatically. An unexpected event occurred in their home. This incident triggered a chain of events that devastated the family and shocked those around them. Law enforcement, friends, neighbors all sought to understand how this seemingly perfect family could unravel what actually happened behind closed doors. In the dense forests of British Columbia, Randy Jansen led an ordinary life in a small town called Langley. Known for its brick storefronts and cozy coffee shops, Langley was viewed as a peaceful haven. Randy experienced years of hard work and unfulfilled dreams that often brought him unhappiness. From a young age, Randy had a strong bond with his father, who worked at a local lumber mill. His father taught him the skills of woodworking. After graduating high school, Randy followed in his father's footsteps by securing a job at the same mill. The job was tough, requiring long hours and significant physical effort, but Randy was used to hard work. In Langley, the lumber mill was seen as a vital part of the local economy and way of life. For more than 10 years, he committed himself to the challenging routine of processing wood and transporting logs. Although the work was repetitive and tiring, it provided him with stability. Each day might have seemed the same, but Randy found meaning in the rhythm of his work and his role in the community. The lumber mill represented stability in Randy's life, while music served as his escape, a way for him to express emotions he often found difficult to put into words. Since childhood, music had been important to him. Over time, playing guitar and singing shifted from being just a hobby to a crucial outlet for his feelings. Randy often performed at a local bar in Langley, where residents gathered to relax after their long workdays and enjoy live music. On stage, he transformed from his usually quiet self into an engaging and energetic performer, captivating his audience. The townspeople appreciated his heartfelt performances, which were filled with authenticity and passion. At a local bar one ordinary evening, Randy met Laurel, a woman who would profoundly impact his life. Laurel, 6 years older than Randy, worked as a bartender and often watched his performances from behind the bar. She was confident, charismatic, well loved by the patrons for her ability to create a welcoming atmosphere and her friendly demeanor. What began as casual chats about music and life quickly developed into a deeper bond. Their mutual love for music and shared aspirations brought them closer. Laurel played the piano and, although her life had taken a different path, she had always dreamed of pursuing a professional music career. This common dream, paired with genuine interest in each other, soon evolved into something much more significant. Life at the lumber mill went on as usual for Randy, but everything changed with Laurel's presence. Their relationship grew stronger as they started planning their future together. Although Langley felt familiar and comfortable, it began to seem too small for the aspirations they had. They dreamed of a life where music could be more than just a pastime. They wanted it to be the core of their future. Randy's days at the mill, his nights performing at the bar, and his evenings with Laurel filled him with a sense of purpose, love. He hoped for what lay ahead. Randy and Laurel frequently looked back on their wedding day in 1990. It was a modest ceremony with just their closest friends and family, creating a warm and intimate setting. The event featured live music, including a special song that Randy sang for Laurel, marking the start of their loving journey together. A few years later, their daughter Emily was born. She quickly became the center of their family. Randy often expressed how Emily was the best thing that ever happened to him. Anyone who knew them could see the deep love he had for her. Emily was only 8 years old when her life changed drastically. She started suffering from severe headaches that were so painful she could no longer participate in her music activities. From a young age, Emily had a natural talent for singing, which amazed her parents and earned her awards in competitions. She was living a lively life, taking vocal lessons and dreaming of becoming a singer. Her parents, encouraged by her success, did everything possible to support her dreams. Initially, Randy and Laurel struggled to understand their daughter's condition. They visited multiple doctors and underwent numerous medical tests, but none provided clear answers, leaving them confused. Emily had to leave school and start home-based learning because the bright lights and loud noises in classrooms worsened her severe headaches. Her room turned into a dim sanctuary where she spent most of her time. Randy and Laurel took turns caring for her, trying their best to alleviate her pain and offer comfort during her difficult times. After thorough medical evaluations, the doctors diagnosed Emily with migraines. This news deeply affected her entire family. The medications they prescribed provided only slight relief, easing her pain a little but never completely stopping the headaches. The music she previously cherished, which brought her so much happiness, was now unattainable. Once a vibrant and energetic young woman, Emily began to withdraw, spending most of her time in silence, darkness. Randy and Laurel were determined to find a solution for their daughter's condition. They explored numerous treatments, consulted many specialists, and looked into alternative therapies, but nothing provided the lasting relief they had been hoping for. The medical outlook was bleak. Migraines are often chronic, and many people suffer from them for life. Statistics revealed that around 53% of migraine sufferers cannot drive because of their symptoms, 30% find it difficult to finish their education, and 34% encounter issues in maintaining employment. Although these figures indicated that Emily's situation was relatively common, they offered little comfort to her parents, as they witnessed her once vibrant spirit fade. Randy went through a really tough time during these years. Music, which had once been his escape, now reminded him painfully that Emily could no longer share in the joy it brought her. Playing guitar in the evenings felt empty without her voice alongside him, and performing at the local bar, which used to be a source of joy for him, no longer felt fulfilling. He began to spend more time at home to support Emily as much as he could. However, as her condition worsened, both Randy and Laurel felt increasingly powerless. Their vibrant daughter, who was once full of life and determination, now isolated herself in her room, avoiding the world and its noise. Randy continued to work, but his thoughts were constantly with Emily. Each morning, he hoped to find a way to relieve her suffering. By the time Emily turned 18, her condition had worsened significantly. Her migraine episodes became more frequent and intense, sometimes lasting for several days. This constant pain made it difficult for her to study and maintain friendships. Despite these obstacles, Emily remained determined. She enrolled in the Fine Arts program at the University of British Columbia, aspiring to become an opera singer. For Emily, going to university was not just about academics. It was an opportunity to regain a sense of normalcy and pursue the life she had always dreamed of. Despite feeling physically exhausted and experiencing frequent pain, Emily committed herself to staying active. She took vocal lessons, learned music theory, studied art history and literature. She also participated in student events and concerts whenever possible. Her classmates admired her determination to engage in university life despite the challenges she faced. However, beneath this outward involvement, Emily was battling significant struggles. She frequently had to miss classes and catch up on her studies alone. The strong medications prescribed for her migraines left her feeling tired, drowsy, and weak. Her treatment plan included triptans, anticonvulsants, and antidepressants to help manage her symptoms. But these medications also had serious side effects, such as depression, difficulty concentrating, and a decline in her overall health. Over time, Emily chose to limit her medication intake as much as possible to lessen its effects on her body and began exploring alternative ways to manage her condition. Emily focused on meditation and breathing exercises, used cold compresses on her head, and stayed away from bright lights, strong smells, and loud noises. Her room became a safe space where she could escape anything that increased her pain. During her worst migraine episodes, she would sometimes stay in complete darkness for entire days, while her parents took turns caring for her and doing their best to alleviate her discomfort. Despite these challenges, Emily worked hard to maintain a sense of normal life. She kept in touch with her friends, even though she couldn't see them as frequently as before. Sometimes, she had to cancel plans at the last moment due to sudden migraine attacks. However, her friends remained supportive, visiting her at home and spending time with her to ensure she didn't feel alone. Despite her challenges, Emily remained committed to the things she loved. Her desire to return to music and live a fulfilling life never faltered, even as the journey became increasingly difficult. On May 7, 2015, Randy shocked everyone in his life with a Facebook post. He revealed some unimaginable actions he had taken in the prior 10 days. He started the post by expressing his love for his daughter, Emily, whom he described as an exceptional daughter, talented, intelligent, and kind. Emily brought immense joy to their family, filling their home with laughter and always willing to assist others, even while facing her own struggles. Unfortunately, her illness had robbed her of so much, forcing her to give up dreams she had worked tirelessly to achieve. Emily had been experiencing migraines since elementary school. The persistent pain caused her to fall into deep depression, making it common for her to endure days without relief. Randy observed how his daughter watched her classmates enjoy normal lives while she spent her time in hospitals or isolated in her dark, quiet room. Despite her efforts to hope for a brighter future, nothing seemed to alleviate her suffering. Randy worked at a lumber mill, but when he wasn't working, he dedicated all his time to Emily. He often told his friends that she was his whole world and that he couldn't bear the thought of life without her. Watching her in pain and feeling powerless to help was pushing him toward despair. Friends noted how Randy shared his struggles with them, making it evident how deeply he was affected emotionally. In this Facebook post, he confessed to taking a gun and ending Emily's life, explaining that he did it to free her from her constant pain. He described his vision of her as an angel soaring above the clouds, her long hair flowing in the wind, finally at peace. But he didn't stop there. Randy also revealed that he had taken the life of his wife, Laurel, because he couldn't bear the thought of her enduring the heartbreak of losing their daughter. A few days later, he also ended the life of his sister, Shelley, claiming he wanted to spare her from the shame of his actions. In the post, Randy shared Emily's journey in her battle against illness, highlighting her incredible strength and resilience. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, the illness had taken its toll. Randy expressed his helplessness as he watched her suffer daily, knowing he couldn't change her situation. He often told friends that he would do anything to support Emily, and ultimately, he felt this was the only way to help her. At the end of his Facebook post, Randy mentioned that his family was now in a better place, free from suffering. He expressed sorrow for his actions, took full responsibility, and apologized to anyone he had hurt. The post closed with the haunting phrase, "Rest in peace, my little family." After Randy's post went live, his friends and acquaintances immediately alerted the police out of concern for Randy's family. They were shocked by the content and wanted to ensure everyone's safety. Law enforcement acted quickly after receiving several calls. Officers were sent to Randy's home to look into the matter. One of Randy's closest friends, Brian Jones, was filled with fear and confusion as he read the Facebook post. Initially, he hoped it was just a mistake or a cruel joke. However, when he saw the signature, Daddy-O, Hugs and Kisses, a nickname Randy had used since school, Brian understood that Randy had truly written those words. This left Brian in shock and disbelief. He had always seen Randy as a kind and caring person, deeply devoted to his family. The thought that his friend could commit such an act or even possess a firearm was unfathomable to him. Brian remembered how lovingly Randy spoke of his family, making it difficult for him to grasp how things had taken such a tragic turn. The seriousness of the situation struck him immediately, and he knew he needed to respond quickly. He left work early and made his way to Shelley's house, trying to call Randy as he went. Each unanswered call only increased his worry. When Brian got to Shelley's house, he saw a pile of undelivered newspapers on the porch. This was unusual because Shelley was always dependable and took her responsibilities seriously. Her old van was in the driveway, the curtains were tightly shut. The yard was eerily silent, with no signs of life. Brian knocked on the door multiple times, but no one answered. The atmosphere felt unsettling and unnaturally quiet. Shelley had become a private person after her parents died. She lived by herself, had no children, and hardly spoke to her neighbors. Her primary job was delivering newspapers, and she was recognized for her reliability, punctuality. When Brian noticed the newspapers piled up without being picked up, he became worried and called the police. The dispatcher told him that he wasn't the only one worried about the family. A patrol unit was already on its way to investigate. When the police arrived, they tried to reach Randy Jansen, who was inside his house. They saw him through a second-floor window with a gun. The officers used loudspeakers and attempted to call him, but Randy did not reply. Understanding the seriousness of the situation, the officers proceeded cautiously to prevent further escalation. The house was surrounded, and negotiators began their work, but Randy did not show any intention to surrender or communicate. After several hours, the situation became much more critical. Randy set the house on fire, and officers saw smoke rising from the upper floor. They tried to get inside, but the flames spread too quickly, blocking access through the windows. Officers noticed a body wrapped in a sheet on the first floor, but they couldn't reach it to confirm its identity. Within minutes, the fire took over the entire house. When firefighters arrived, the house was fully engulfed in flames, and they could not save it. Investigators discovered 3 bodies in the charred remains of the house on Lanberis Road in Rosedale. 19-year-old Emily was found in her bedroom, wrapped in a sheet. 50-year-old Laurel was located in the kitchen, covered with a blanket. Both women had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Randy's body was located in a second-floor bedroom. He had died by suicide using a firearm and setting the house ablaze. The positioning of his body and the presence of the weapon indicated that Randy was experiencing severe emotional distress when he made the choice to end his life. When police arrived at the home of Randy's sister in Langley, British Columbia, they found her body in the living room. She had been shot twice in the head and was covered with a blanket. No signs of a struggle, indicating that Randy had likely caught her by surprise. Over the past year, Emily's health had worsened significantly. Doctors had to give her morphine injections to manage her severe pain, and these were used as a last resort. Neighbors often witnessed her parents assisting her into their home after her hospital visits. Emily was so weak that she required help to walk, which was heartbreaking for everyone who knew the family. Randy Jansen, Emily's father, dedicated himself to caring for his family despite facing numerous challenges. A year prior to the tragic events, he sought assistance from their family doctor due to ongoing insomnia and intense stress. He shared his struggles with witnessing his daughter's pain. The doctor suggested using sedatives and advised Randy to focus on getting more rest, but Randy refused the medication, feeling it wouldn't truly solve his problems. Brian noted that Randy had never indicated any thoughts of self-harm or intentions to harm others. He described Randy as a calm and hard-working individual always willing to help. Randy consistently put his family first, so no one could have anticipated he was capable of such actions. Brian observed that Randy had reached his breaking point. He could no longer endure watching his daughter suffer, which led him to make a heartbreaking decision. Neighbors who had known Randy since he was a child found it hard to reconcile this event with the kind and gentle person they remembered. They noted that he had never shown any signs of aggression or cruelty. His actions appeared to stem from a sense of desperation and an inability to cope with the immense pain affecting his family. One neighbor recalled Randy saying that if his daughter were to die, he wouldn't have a reason to live. Emily's last tweet, posted just 4 days before the tragedy, stated, "I complain about the pain, but at least I'm here to feel it. I thank God for the chance to live." In Emily's Twitter account, she wrote, "For the first time in 2 years, I've gone 12 hours without pain. I'm so tired of hurting, but I need to keep going." Her resilience was clear, despite the immense challenges she faced. This message expressed her determination to cherish life despite the significant suffering she faced. Her social media posts often reflected her struggle to stay positive in the midst of her illness, highlighting her hope even when times were tough. Emily was remembered as a kind and caring young woman who made an effort to stay connected with her community. She loved music and sang at the local church whenever her health allowed. Many residents of Langley have fond memories of her performances, but as her health declined, she was able to attend church less often. Despite her challenges, she remained generous and thoughtful, baking with her mother, sharing treats with neighbors. On her good days, she also helped local children with their homework. Laurel, Emily's mother, did everything possible to support her daughter. In a Twitter post, she expressed her feelings, saying, "Emily is back in the hospital, praying to God they can help her. I feel so helpless." These words showed the deep pain and despair she experienced while watching her daughter suffer. Although Laurel was emotionally drained, she was determined not to give up and continuously sought ways to improve Emily's condition. Similarly, Shelley, Randy's sister, could not predict the tragedy that would occur. The family never imagined their lives would be changed in such a devastating manner. Over the past year, Randy often shared with friends the heavy burden and stress he felt due to Emily's illness. No one could have predicted that he would eventually become so emotionally fragile that he would consider harming his family. Randy struggled to manage the emotional strain. Despite their shared despair, the family attempted to support one another, but their situation continued to worsen, leading to an unforeseen and tragic outcome. With the details now revealed, it is obvious that feelings of despair, hidden challenges, and deep hopelessness led to an unexpected tragedy. The story of the Jansen family serves as a sobering reminder that even within seemingly stable homes, deep pain can linger just beneath the surface, occasionally breaking out in unpredictable ways.
At first, building a business together seems ideal. There's trust, less risk of betrayal, and profits stay within the family. However, what happens when a small venture rapidly expands into a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar empire? The case of Andreen was complicated and unsettling. She went missing from her own home, and few believed she was still alive. However, without a body or strong evidence against the suspect, the investigation stalled. Months went by with no progress. The suspect seemed likely to go free. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, a local rancher made a shocking discovery that changed everything. Andreen McDonald, born Anderson, was born on September 23, 1989, in Port Antonio, Portland, Jamaica. Her parents were Jamaicans who immigrated to the United States. She is the second of 3 daughters. Known for her friendly nature, charm, and good looks, Andreen had many friends and received a lot of admiration. While in high school, Andreen formed a close friendship with Andre McDonald. Andre was also born and raised in Jamaica. He was the only child of Marina and Everton McDonald. His parents eventually separated while Andre was still in school, and his father moved to the United States, where he remarried another woman. In the early 2000s, Andre moved to Florida to live with his father. He attended the International Technical University and earned an engineering degree. Instead of following a career in engineering, he chose to enter the military, signing a contract and serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Throughout his military service, Andre and Andreen maintained regular contact through calls, messages, and visits whenever he returned to Jamaica to see his mother. Their relationship deepened over time, evolving into a meaningful, long-term partnership, and they realized they couldn't imagine life without each other. After graduating high school, Andreen moved to the United States to be with Andre. About a year later, they had a small wedding with only their closest family and friends. Shortly after their marriage, Andre was transferred from sunny Florida to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. He quickly began planning for their future, and Andreen enrolled at the University of Texas to pursue a degree in economics. In 2013, they welcomed their daughter. Around the same time, they started a business by opening their first. The assisted living is called Starlight Homes. The venture quickly gained popularity, leading them to open a second facility in another city soon after. Within a few years, their network of assisted living was generating substantial income. While Andre continued his military career and traveled frequently for work, Andreen took charge of managing their multi-million-dollar business's daily operations. They purchased a beautiful home with a pool in an upscale neighborhood in Behar County, owned several luxury vehicles, and planned to expand their business into nearby states. In 2016, after her father's passing, Andreen brought her mother from Jamaica to live with them. Her mother helped around the house and cared for their daughter when both parents were busy. A few years later, they bought her a small, comfortable house nearby and gifted her a personal vehicle. In early 2019, 37-year-old Andre, a major in the U.S. Air Force, chose to move to the reserves. He wanted to stay in San Antonio to spend more time with his family and get more involved in their flourishing business, easing the workload for his wife, Andreen. Their company, which consisted of a network of assisted living facilities, was thriving and had grown across the state to be worth nearly $1 billion. From the outside, the McDonald family seemed to have it all: success, wealth, a bright daughter, and a successful business. However, beneath this facade of prosperity, tensions were starting to rise, issues unknown to most people. On Friday, March 1, 2019, 29-year-old Andreen did not show up for work, and her phone was turned off. This was very unusual for her. Concerned, her assistant and close friend, Carol, reached out multiple times but couldn't get in touch. Eventually, Carol and two colleagues decided to visit the McDonald home to check on Andreen. After knocking for a long time without an answer, Carol refused to leave and began walking around the house to investigate. In the backyard, she discovered something troubling: a charred spot with a zipper partially sticking out of the ashes, suggesting someone had been burning clothes. But who would do such a thing, and why? Nothing else appeared suspicious from the outside. When Carol pulled on the back door and found it unlocked, she stepped inside cautiously. She called out for Andreen and Andre but got no response. The house was eerily quiet, as if they had just stepped out. In the bathroom, she spotted odd streaks on the light switch that appeared to be dried blood, along with dark stains on the floor that raised alarm bells. Carol recorded her observations on her phone and contacted the local authorities to report her findings. Officers arrived quickly and began searching the home. Their discoveries heightened the concerns. The carpet in the master bedroom had been scrubbed with a strong industrial cleaner, leaving a lingering chemical smell. There were faint blood spots on the floor and a smear on the doorframe. Detectives thought this could be the scene of a serious crime, but the minimal blood left some hope that Andreen might be alive. Andre was unreachable by phone, and his location was unknown. Initially, the whereabouts of their daughter were also uncertain, but authorities soon confirmed she was safe at her paternal grandmother's house. All three of McDonald's vehicles were present, two were parked outside and the third, a Chevrolet Malibu, was in the garage. The car caught the officers' attention because it was covered in dust, indicating it had likely been on dirt roads recently, with small gravel stuck in the tires. Although there were no clear signs of damage or blood, the state of the car raised suspicions. While investigators were still inspecting the house, the homeowner, Andre, suddenly appeared at the front door. He appeared anxious and confused about the police presence on his property. When questioned about his whereabouts and what had happened, Andre stated that he had spent the night looking for his wife. He mentioned several hospitals he had visited to check if Andreen had been admitted. A follow-up confirmed that Andre had indeed gone to those hospitals. Additionally, at one of the hospitals, when the staff mentioned that someone with the last name McDonald had been checked in, Andre reportedly turned pale, stepped back, and quickly left without realizing it was just another person with the same last name. From the beginning, Andre's actions raised red flags. The officers decided to question him to hear his side of the story. Andre explained that he and Andreen had a domestic argument, so he left the house to calm down. When he came back, she was not there. He mentioned that he tried calling her multiple times, and when she didn't answer, he took their daughter to his mother's house and kept looking for Andreen. It was hard to track his movements because his phone had been turned off since the night before and stayed off until he returned. When the officers asked why his phone was off, Andre changed his demeanor and said he wouldn't answer any more questions without a lawyer. At that point, investigators realized something was off. However, without strong evidence, they had to release him after the first interview. He was given a travel restriction order and placed under discreet surveillance at his home. It was later revealed that on the same day Andreen went missing, he had made several concerning purchases at different hardware stores. He paid in cash for items such as a shovel, large heavy-duty trash bags, a small hatchet, work gloves, duct tape, and fire starter fluid. Andre seemed to be trying to leave no trace by keeping his phone off and not using a credit card. Nevertheless, law enforcement tracked him down using security camera footage from those stores. Meanwhile, forensic testing confirmed that the blood found at the home belonged to Andrine. As suspicions intensified, the police decided to detain Andre for further questioning and obtained a warrant to conduct a comprehensive search of his home, including the seizure and examination of all digital devices. During a brief period when he went missing, Andre returned home but left almost immediately, unaware that officers were tracking him. He stopped at a gun shop, where he bought a large-caliber handgun and a substantial amount of ammunition, paying in cash. Strangely, after completing the purchase, he turned and walked out of the store, leaving the firearm and ammunition on the counter. His demeanor appeared disconnected, his eyes were vacant, and his movements erratic, suggesting a loss of touch with reality. However, experienced officers suspected this behavior was an act, possibly a prelude to a future defense claiming mental instability. Andre was arrested as he exited the store, and he did not resist. Formal charges were filed against him. During a physical examination, investigators discovered fresh scratches on his hands and forearms, which appeared to be fingernail marks. Although Andre could not provide a clear explanation for these injuries, those present recognized the likely cause, a struggle. Nearly 48 hours had passed since Andrine was last seen. The increasing circumstantial evidence made it hard to believe she might still be alive. A large-scale search effort was launched, involving law enforcement, volunteers, and hundreds of concerned citizens. Teams searched the areas around San Antonio, particularly the rural parts of Bexar County, hoping to find clues to advance the investigation. Sadly, they found nothing useful, neither in the fields, wooded areas, nor urban zones. Even a thorough examination of the digital devices taken from the home, including a phone and tablet, did not produce any promising leads. However, when investigators conducted a second, more thorough search of the vehicles and garage, the case changed dramatically. They found newly purchased tools and supplies that matched items Andre had bought at several hardware stores. Then, in the trunk of Andre's Porsche Macan, they discovered a shovel wrapped in plastic. The shovel had strange dark stains on it and several long strands of hair attached to it. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood and tissue on the shovel matched Andrine's DNA, the hair strands were also hers. However, the handle had been wiped clean of fingerprints. When questioned, Andre claimed he had never seen the shovel before and suggested that someone must have planted it in his car. Despite the growing evidence against him, Andre posted bail, set at $2 million, which he paid immediately, allowing for his swift release. Once home, he did not join the ongoing search for Andrine. He maintained his story that they had an argument, he left to calm down, and when he returned, Andrine was missing. Andre claimed he tried to contact her afterwards, sending both voice and text messages. Some of these messages, which were found on his phone, contained emotional appeals, telling her their daughter was crying and urging her to come home. All of these messages were sent around midnight, after which his phone was turned off again. As the investigation into her disappearance continued without any leads, detectives decided to look into the McDonald family's background. They quickly discovered that their seemingly perfect relationship was misleading. In reality, their marriage was under significant strain for quite some time. Although they had built a successful business together that was growing rapidly and generating good income, most daily operations were handled by Andrine, especially while Andre was serving in the military. During Andre's 6-month deployment in Alabama in 2016, their emotional distance increased. Just before he was scheduled to return home, Andrine messaged him suggesting that they should go their separate ways and that he didn't need to come back. When Andre returned, he found out that while he was away, Andrine had begun a relationship with other man, Aubin Hall, whom she had known since her childhood in Jamaica, also her ex-lover. She even has a tattoo on her arm that is the letter A, the first letter of Aubin's name, which she says was a mistake of her youth. Aubin and Andrine reconnected during one of Andrine's visits to Jamaica, leading to a rekindling of their relationship. He started visiting her in Texas, and they decided they wanted to be together, prompting Andrine to file for divorce. Under Texas law, Andrine and Andre were required to divide their assets and business equally, which caused significant disagreement between them. Andrine felt entitled to a larger share because she managed the operations, while Andre argued that everything belonged to him since he had funded the initial startup. About 6 months later, the divorce proceedings were put on hold as they appeared to have reconciled, deciding to give their marriage another chance for the sake of their young daughter. However, despite this outward appearance of stability, underlying tensions remained. Andre had consistently opposed Andrine's trips back to Jamaica because he knew she would meet her former lover, leading to ongoing conflict between them, but Andrine continued to make her own decisions. Carol, Andrine's closest friend and the first to alert authorities after Andrine's disappearance, described Andre as controlling, manipulative. He believed that the business, their home, and even Andrine herself were his possessions, citing that he had brought her to the US, helped her gain citizenship, paid for her college education, and financed their first assisted living. Shortly before she went missing, Andrine confided in Carol, saying, "If anything ever happens to her, just know it was Andre." Just 2 weeks before Andrine disappeared, Andre found out that she had secretly registered a new company in her name and moved part of their shared assets into it. This discovery likely felt like a betrayal and may have contributed to the tensions between them. On July 11, 2019, 4.5 months after Andrine went missing, a local farmer named Clifton Clavin was walking on his property on the outskirts of San Antonio. Since the land was only partially cultivated, some areas had become overgrown. While surveying the grounds for future maintenance, Clifton noticed a strong, unpleasant smell that seemed to be related to decomposition. Assuming it was the scent of a dead animal, he followed it, intending to bury or remove whatever he found. In the tall grass, he first saw a skull and some bones that looked like they belonged to a cow. However, under some scattered branches, he discovered the real source of the odor, a nearly fully decomposed human body. Clifton immediately contacted the police. The remains were recovered and sent to a lab for analysis. The body was found unclothed, and while it was confirmed to be a woman, investigators could determine little else initially. Given the circumstances, many suspected that this was Andrine McDonald, and DNA testing later confirmed those suspicions. The medical examiner was unable to determine a clear cause of death due to the advanced decomposition of the body. However, pathologists found injuries including trauma to the jawbone and a fracture at the base of the skull, which matched the type of harm that could be caused by the hammer found in Andre's car. Additionally, much of her hair was missing, which was initially alarming. When the examiners observed partial burns on her right hand, they deduced that someone had tried to burn the body, probably to destroy evidence. As a result of these findings, Andre was officially charged with the crime and taken back into custody. The area where the remains were discovered had been searched several times by law enforcement and volunteers, but the exact location was on private property, behind a fence about 60 feet from the road, making it inaccessible without a warrant. This is why it had not been investigated earlier. When Andre learned that Andrine's remains were found and that evidence indicated she had suffered blunt force trauma, he changed his approach. He informed investigators that he was willing to share everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. After talking with his attorney, Andre presented a revised version of events, painting himself as a victim. He mentioned his wife's infidelity, her attempts to take over their business with her new partner, and his fear that she would take their daughter from him during a divorce. Andre reported that Andrine had recently mentioned ending their marriage again and had allegedly threatened to leave him without anything and take their daughter with her. That evening, they had a heated argument. Andre claimed that Andrine grew aggressive and started hitting him, which led him to defend himself. During the struggle, he said she got a minor cut. Andre admitted to pushing her, causing her to fall, and he then kicked her several times and stepped on her chest to keep her from getting back up. When he heard footsteps in the hallway and his daughter calling for her mom, he panicked. He quickly left the room before the girl could come inside, picked her up, took her back to her room, and told her that her mom would come to check on her later. Andre maintained that when he left the room, Andrine was still alive, lying on the floor with only a slight injury. However, when he returned, she was in the same position but unresponsive. He believed that he might have unintentionally contributed to a fatal outcome by applying too much pressure on her chest during the struggle. Realizing the seriousness of what had happened, Andre began to panic. He took off Andrine's clothes and burned them in his backyard. He then moved her body outside the city, leaving it on private property behind a fence near the remains of a cow. Later, he went home and sent many texts to Andrine's phone, begging her to return, hoping to make it look like she had simply left after a disagreement. Following that, he woke his daughter and took her to his mother's house, asking her to care for her granddaughter while he searched for his missing wife. To further support his story, he visited several hospitals, pretending to look for Andrine. He nearly fainted upon hearing that a woman with the same last name had been admitted to one of the hospitals. By the time the police brought him in for questioning the next morning, they still lacked strong evidence against him, so he was released. After being freed, Andre began to seriously consider ways to ensure the body would never be discovered. He even thought about dismembering and burning it, then scattering the remains in different locations. To do this, he purchased a hatchet, a shovel, fire starter fluid, and heavy-duty plastic bags. The following day, he returned to the location where he had left Andrine. However, when it was time to execute his plan, he could not go through with it. Instead, he poured flammable liquid on her body and attempted to light a fire, but it quickly went out, only burning her hair and partially charring one of her hands. Andre later described the failure as leaving him in a state of utter despair. In a moment of anger, he grabbed an old hammer from his car and struck the body several times before regaining his composure and stopping. He then covered the remains with branches and cow bones. When asked why he visited a gun store, purchased a pistol and ammunition, and then left the items at the counter, Andre stated he couldn't explain his actions. He mentioned that his thoughts were muddled, he hadn't slept for almost 2 days, and he wasn't thinking clearly. The trial faced significant delays, with hearings only commencing in January 2023. The defense team aimed to present Andre as a victim of his circumstances. His lawyers argued that Andrine and her boyfriend were allegedly conspiring to eliminate Andre from their lives to avoid splitting their assets during the divorce. Andre McDonald provided a detailed account of what happened to his wife, but the condition of her body made it impossible to verify his claims. Forensic experts could not determine her exact cause of death or whether her injuries occurred while she was alive or if, as Andre alleged, he hit her with a hammer after she died. What was evident, however, is that for 5 months, Andre stayed silent, trying to conceal the crime and evade responsibility. In February 2023, many were shocked when Andre was acquitted of first-degree murder charges. Instead, the jury convicted him of manslaughter and evidence tampering, resulting in a 25-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 15 years. His daughter was awarded to her maternal grandmother. The tragic saga of Andrine McDonald reveals the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences when hidden tensions erupt within a seemingly idyllic life. What began as a shared dream of building a family and a multi-million-dollar empire ended in betrayal, violence, and loss. Andre McDonald's conviction for manslaughter and evidence tampering in February 2023, carrying a 25-year sentence, brought partial justice but left lingering questions about the truth behind Andrine's death. As their daughter finds solace with her maternal grandmother, the McDonald case stands as a stark reminder that even the most prosperous facades can conceal deadly secrets, urging us to confront conflicts before they spiral into tragedy. Sofia Maria Martinez was born on November 14, 1981, in El Paso, Texas. Her parents, Juan and Maria, immigrated from Mexico in the late 1970s in search of a better life. They worked multiple jobs to support their daughters. She grew up alongside her 2 sisters, her older sister Dulce and her younger sister Marianne. Since a young age, they have shared a close bond. When Sofia was 12, family tensions arose, and her parents divorced in 1995. 3 sisters live with their mother, who later remarried a successful man named Iladio and had 2 sons with him. Meanwhile, Juan began a new family, leading to reduced contact with his daughters from his first marriage. Despite this, Sofia did not hold any resentment toward her father and developed a good relationship with her stepfather. Sofia grew up to be kind, outgoing, and compassionate, often helping her mother with the younger children and providing them with support. She had a particularly strong bond with her younger sister, and they were best friends. At 15, Sophia took a part-time job as a sales associate at a local mall, saving money diligently over the years. She dreamed of owning a bright red Pontiac. Knowing about her dream, her mother and stepfather gifted her the remaining amount she needed to buy the car when she turned 18. In November 1999, Sophia proudly drove her brand new car off the dealership lot, a vehicle she had long admired. She took great care of it, keeping it clean inside and out, and drove it carefully. The car was a source of pride for her, and she never allowed anyone else to drive it. By the year 2000, Sophia was preparing for her graduation and was excited about the upcoming senior prom. She carefully selected the perfect dress, shoes, and accessories for the big night. Weekends were spent shopping with her sister, trying on outfits, planning hairstyles, and choosing makeup. In February, the senior yearbook photos were taken, capturing students in their graduation caps and gowns, and Sophia was filled with joy, eager to start college. She planned to pursue a history major at the prestigious University of Texas, with the ambition of becoming a teacher. Unfortunately, Sophia's dreams would never be realized. Although she had many friends, she had never been in a serious relationship. She focused on her schoolwork and job rather than dating. While she sometimes accepted invitations from boys interested in her, none of those dates turned into anything significant. In early March, her coworker Justin suggested setting her up on a blind date with a friend of his. After some initial hesitation, she agreed, and they planned to meet on the evening of Friday, March 10th. They decided to go to a popular nightclub that allowed entry to those 18 and older, unlike most places that required patrons to be 21. On the evening of March 10, 2000, Sophia hurried home from school, excited to prepare for her blind date. She tried on at least 10 different outfits, stepping out each time for her family's feedback. Ultimately, they all agreed she looked stunning in a bright red evening dress that flattered her figure while remaining elegant and modest. She applied her makeup, styled her hair in soft curls, put on a pair of heels, and carried a small clutch bag. The final touch was her favorite perfume. By 10 p.m., she was completely ready. She entered the living room looking glamorous and twirled to show off her outfit. Her family was impressed, confident that she would make a great impression. She promised to be home no later than 2 a.m. since she had a work shift at the mall the next day, and no one was particularly worried. She was responsible and always kept her promises. At 10:10 p.m., Sophia left the house with a bright smile, climbed into her beloved red Pontiac, and waved goodbye to her family as they watched from the window. None of them could have imagined that it would be the last time they saw her alive. The following morning, her younger sister Mary peeked into her room and noticed something odd. She was missing, and her bed was not just neatly made, it looked untouched. It seemed she had left for work, yet her employee badge sat on the vanity, and her usual work shoes were in the corner by the closet. Mary informed her mother, and at that moment, the phone rang. It was a call from Sophia's employer, reporting that she hadn't shown up for her shift, something unprecedented. This alarmed Sophia's family, who were unsure about what to do next. Since she didn't have a cell phone, her family started calling the landlines of her friends, classmates, and coworkers. Unfortunately, no one had seen her since the previous night, and they did not know how to contact the boys she was with. They also reached out to local hospitals, worried that she might have been in an accident. By the evening, without any updates on her whereabouts, the family decided to go to the police to report her missing. They took a recent photo of her and provided a detailed description of her outfit when she left home, as well as specific information about the car she was driving. On Saturday, March 11th, police made a disturbing discovery in the New Mexico desert. They found an abandoned red Pontiac about 100 yards off the highway connecting Texas and New Mexico. The passenger side window had a bullet hole, and there were dark, dried stains resembling blood on the seat, steering wheel, and headrest. Experienced officers quickly suspected foul play and feared that the driver might be seriously injured or worse. The car was sent to a forensic lab for analysis. However, since the discovery occurred in a different state, law enforcement struggled to find a direct connection to Sophia. After checking the car's registration, authorities confirmed that the red Pontiac belonged to Maria Martinez from Texas. They contacted her to see if the car had been stolen and to find out that it had been driven by her daughter, Sophia, who had been reported missing the previous day. The family was baffled as to how Sophia's car ended up abandoned in a desert in a neighboring state and where she might be. Maria emphasized that her daughter cherished her car and would never have left it behind, suggesting that something terrible must have happened. One theory was that the vehicle had been hijacked and that Sophia might have been harmed, but there was still hope that she could be found alive. However, with no leads in sight, law enforcement was unsure where to begin their search. On Sunday, March 12, a group of teenagers walking near the outskirts of El Paso spotted something shiny in the desert and decided to investigate. As they got closer, they found the lifeless body of a young woman in a red evening dress. They hurried home to tell their parents, who called the police. Forensic investigators arrived at the scene within an hour. Officers discovered the young woman lying on her back, her face so disfigured that she was unidentifiable. Her dress was soaked in blood and covered with sand. Although no identification was found, police believed they had discovered the body of a girl named Sophia, who had been reported missing 2 days earlier. When Sophia's family was informed that a body had been found in the desert, her mother, Maria, refused to accept it, convinced that there had been a mistake and that her daughter was still alive. Her doubts disappeared when detectives showed her a photograph taken from the victim's bra. The picture showed Sophia holding her youngest brother, which confirmed her identity, as it was known that Sophia often carried photos of her siblings in her wallet. In her final moments, she had placed one close to her heart. The autopsy revealed that she had died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head, having been shot 5 times in the face. One bullet traveled through her head and was later found in the sand at the crime scene. The severity of her injuries left her with no chance of survival. Additionally, there were clear signs of a struggle, including severe bruising and indications of physical violence. The inner surfaces of her thighs were bruised and scratched, and forensic examinations confirmed internal injuries consistent with an assault. DNA analysis also provided biological evidence, and defensive wounds on her hands indicated that she had fought fiercely for her life but ultimately was overpowered. None of Sophia's personal belongings were found, except for a photograph she had hidden in her clothing. Due to the severity of her injuries, her identity could only be confirmed through DNA testing, as even dental records proved ineffective. Toxicology reports later revealed that there were no substances in her system at the time of death. Investigators discovered several shoe prints near the body. While most were unclear, one distinct impression helped forensic analysts identify the size and tread pattern of the sole. Authorities found only Sophia's fingerprints inside her car. Although her purse was recovered from the vehicle, the perpetrator had taken her license, keys, and cash. Her family was advised to change their locks and install a security system because the killer had access to her home address from her ID and had her keys. Her family followed these recommendations but lived in constant fear that the person responsible for her death might target someone else. DNA samples from the biological evidence left by the attacker were uploaded into the National Criminal Database, but no matches were found. This indicated that the suspect likely had no prior criminal record, complicating the investigation. Authorities also considered the possibility that the suspect was a transient who had crossed illegally from Mexico, committed the crime, and then fled back, making him even harder to track. A crucial lead emerged when investigators learned that Sophia had gone on a blind date the night she disappeared, arranged by a coworker. They sought to question both men involved. Since her family did not have their contact information, officers visited her workplace at the mall. Justin, the coworker who set up the date, was on shift that day and agreed to go to the station for questioning. The second man, Marcus, was also interviewed. During the interview, Justin explained that he had planned to meet Sophia at the club, but she never arrived. He and Marcus waited for her until around midnight before they left. He only learned that Sophia was missing the next day when she didn't show up for work. Both Justin and Marcus took polygraph tests to verify their statements, provided DNA samples, and turned over the shoes they wore that night. The results showed no connection to the crime, and their alibis were strong, as many people had seen them at the club. During a closer examination of Sophia's car, officers discovered a crumpled ATM receipt that had slipped under the driver's seat. The receipt indicated that at 10:23 p.m., she had withdrawn $20 from an ATM located just a few blocks from her residence. This detail became a crucial lead, as the ATM and nearby buildings had surveillance cameras. Investigators reviewed the footage from all available cameras and were shocked by what they found. The crime had been recorded from multiple angles, which helped them understand the sequence of events. At 10:22 p.m., a red Pontiac arrived at the ATM. The driver's side window was rolled down, and a young woman was seen withdrawing $20 from her account. The footage clearly showed that she was alone in the car. After taking the cash, Sophia paused for a moment to apply lipstick using her compact mirror. At that point, a figure dressed entirely in black, with a hood obscuring his face, crept up behind her car. She did not see him until he reached her window. Without warning, he pulled out a gun and attacked her in the head. His intention was not to kill her but to intimidate. The bullet grazed her cheek, clipped her nose, and exited from the passenger side window. Shortly afterward, despite her injury and holding a tissue to her bleeding face, Sophia withdrew another $200 from her account. The car then began to drive away from the ATM with the assailant now inside, holding a gun to the back of her head. Within seconds, the vehicle was out of view of the camera, and what happened next is unknown. It's essential to note that this took place in the early 2000s, a time when surveillance camera quality was not very advanced. The footage was grainy and lacked detail, making it impossible to produce a composite sketch of the suspect. All that could be discerned was that the attacker was a white male of average height with a slim build, possibly sporting facial hair. This information, along with video clips of the attack, was shared on local television to alert residents of the danger and encourage anyone who recognized the suspect to come forward. The investigation was lengthy and frustrating. After a news segment aired, police received numerous calls, but none of them provided useful information. As time passed, the investigation slowed, no new evidence surfaced, leaving authorities with more questions than answers. At the end of March, a man contacted the police, stating that he had found a driver's license near the spot where Sophia's body had been discovered 2 weeks earlier. The license belonged to a local woman, raising concerns that she might also have been a victim. However, when the police reached out to her, they learned she was safe and had not been harmed. She explained that her purse had been stolen earlier that month at a mall, where Sophia had also worked. Investigators believed the suspect could have been stalking potential victims and shared this warning with the media to alert other women. The very next day, a young man came forward, admitting to stealing the purse. He panicked after seeing the news and worried that police might link him to a crime he hadn't committed. He willingly provided a DNA sample and was cleared as a suspect in Sophia's case. By July 2000, the investigation had hit a dead end. To help generate new leads, authorities announced a $10,000 reward for information leading to the capture of the killer. Shortly after, Sophia's family launched a fundraising campaign to increase the reward amount, garnering support from friends, concerned citizens, and local organizations. By August, the reward for information had risen to $55,000. However, 6 months had passed since the tragedy, and no new leads had surfaced. Then, on September 30, 2000, a young woman named Heather Napa called the police, claiming she knew who was responsible for Sophia's death and wanted to share information in exchange for the reward money. Although there had been many false tips before, Heather claimed to have physical evidence. Heather, a 20-year-old mother of 2, alleged that her boyfriend, Michael Jacques, and their friend, William Berkeley, were involved in the crime. To support her claims, she provided a charred driver's license that belonged to Sofia Martinez. She explained that she had been afraid to come forward sooner due to fear of retaliation, but with Michael recently jailed and having no means to support her children, she decided to speak up for both the investigation and the reward. At that time, Heather was hospitalized for kidney issues, while Michael and William were both unemployed and struggling financially. On March 10, William visited her in the hospital and pulled Michael aside for a private conversation. Heather overheard parts of their discussion and realized they were planning something illegal, which she assumed was related to their previous dealings with banned substances. She didn't probe for further details. Shortly afterward, they left, taking a box of latex gloves from a medical supply cabinet. Later that night, around 11 p.m., Michael returned to Heather's hospital room and claimed they had obtained some money. He said he had hidden near an ATM and signaled to William when a single driver approached. After the driver withdrew cash, William allegedly threatened her with a gun, took the money, and ordered her to get out of the car before driving away. Detectives were aware that this account did not match the actual crime, but they allowed Heather to continue. After midnight, a nurse informed Michael that William was waiting for him downstairs. They then left in separate cars, drove to a neighboring state, abandoned the Pontiac in the desert, and returned home in Michael's car. The next day, Heather was released from the hospital and felt anxious about whether the victim would report the crime. To reassure her, William showed her Sophia's driver's license, which noted down Sophia's home address. He casually mentioned that they could intimidate the victim into silence if necessary. Then, without hesitation, he threw the license into a smoldering grill and watched it melt before going to bed. A few days later, Heather watched a news report about Sophia's case and had a realization. She recognized William from the ATM surveillance footage and understood why he had altered his appearance by shaving off his beard and head. When she asked Michael about his involvement, he told her to keep quiet. Heather retrieved the burned license plate from the grill and hid it. She also noticed that Michael had a set of car keys with a Pontiac keychain, although she was unsure of what had happened to them. In August, William left home, and in September, Michael was arrested for distributing banned substances. By that time, feeling safer, Heather decided to come forward and find a way to earn money by providing information to the police. After Heather's statement, investigators brought in 23-year-old Michael Jacques for questioning. Surprisingly, he acknowledged his involvement and agreed to tell his version of events. He claimed that he had nothing to do with Sophia's death but admitted that he helped William cover it up. Michael explained that he and William were in desperate need of money and planned to rob someone at an ATM. When they saw a young girl in a red Pontiac at the ATM, Michael wanted to call off the robbery. However, William misunderstood his actions as a signal to proceed. Although Michael knew William had a gun, he never thought it would be used. The situation quickly escalated, and before Michael realized what was happening, the car sped away. He waited for about 30 minutes, but when William didn't return, he went back to the hospital to be with Heather. Michael insisted that he didn't know what happened to Sophia afterward and denied any knowledge of the assault or murder. However, he confessed to helping dispose of the car. He later learned more information but chose not to report William, aware that he too would face repercussions. A key piece of evidence, a set of car keys, was later found on the roof of Michael's house, exactly where he had thrown them. William Berkeley, the main suspect in the case, was arrested at his parents' home in early October. At just 20 years old, he had no criminal record, but those who knew him reported a pattern of aggression and cruelty dating back to his school years. He had previously assaulted classmates, former girlfriends, and even his mother, yet none of them had reported these incidents to the police. Despite this violent history, William was a talented artist whose work had been showcased in galleries. During his first interrogation, he admitted to robbing and killing Sophia, claiming he needed the money, but he avoided specifics. He insisted that their encounter was consensual and stated that the shooting was accidental. As interrogations progressed and he understood the seriousness of the accusations, he changed his narrative. He began to portray himself as a victim, claiming he was part of a plan led by Michael. William said that Michael had selected the car, believing the owner of a Pontiac would have substantial funds. Unfortunately for them, Sophia only had $220, which they viewed as the price for her life. In the lead-up to the trial, William and Michael tried to shift the blame onto each other, but the evidence presented against William was compelling. Authorities found the murder weapon, a handgun, at his home. His DNA was found on Sophia, and a pair of sneakers matching the footprints at the crime scene were found in his bedroom. On April 7, 2002, William was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death by lethal injection, which was carried out in the spring of 2010. Throughout the years before his execution, he showed no remorse for his actions. Michael Jacques was also found guilty on November 3, 2002, of conspiracy and evidence tampering, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Heather, who had been promised a $55,000 reward, received the money but found no joy in it. She lost custody of her children and, at the age of 35, died from complications related to a chronic kidney condition.